2 vacancies open.
That's what it looks like.
There are 2 vacancies, yes, on the
Yeah,
election.
no other applications have been received, so
I
everyone
support them both.
comfortable?
I support him.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And then next we've got Bill Yoakum and Richard Neely, who both submitted renewal applications for the Healthy Rivers and Stream Boards, and we interviewed them a few weeks ago.
And you also had Scott Graham
Scott
who
Graham.
interviewed. So there are 2 positions right now and 3 applicants.
Okay. Board?
I think we should reappoint Bill Yocums and Rick Neely.
Okay.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, and Scott just got on the election commission, so it's not a shutout.
Okay. Good.
Well, that was easy.
That was easy.
Our second MOI is, let me just catch up to it here, scrolling through her first. But it's a request from Friends of the Aspen Animal Shelter to to have permit fees for a special event reimbursed. And I will tell you what that special event is as soon as I can get to that point. The animal shelter is Friends of the Aspen Animal Shelter, which was the Dancing for the Dogs and Cats fundraiser, which was held back in July. They did pay a $649 permit fee. They are requesting that permit fee be refunded. That's consistent with board policy, which outlines procedures for these types of refunds. The board has typically done that out of your discretionary funds. Each year we budget $10,000 in discretionary funds for unforeseen requests that come in front of the board. At this point, you have not spent any of those dollars at this point in the year, and they did meet all the requirements of your policy for the refund.
Okay.
I'm supportive of the request.
Steve?
I'm supportive of that, and I'll also point out that while the tents were set up, Seth Saxon offered use of the tents and his property for the Snowmass Capitol Creek annual picnic the next day, so it
That's
actually
nice.
served 2 functions 2 days in a row.
Nice.
Good. Okay, so I think that's
That's our memos of interest.
fine.
We'll make that refund then.
So then we'll go on to future agendas.
Yeah, so a few items on future agendas. First, we had scheduled for next week to be in Lake County for our visit with the Lake County Commissioners. We are scheduled to be there at 1 o'clock for lunch, and that's what we built our schedule around. We got a request, I think it first came through Steve, and then when you're at CCI, and then we confirmed that they would like to move that to 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock, which means we would need to leave the courthouse at 10. In my mind, there are a couple of options. We have an executive session scheduled right now in the morning before we were planning to leave. It's really with representatives from our attorney's office as well as the airport. We've confirmed that all of those people involved would be able to move to the afternoon if we wanted to come back and do the executive session after meeting in Twin Lakes. Otherwise, if that is difficult schedule-wise for any reason for anyone, we could also try and reschedule a time.
The other thing that John and I talked about yesterday, in terms of our reaching out to some of our regional partners, in cases such as Lake County and Gunnison County, where they're much more of a further reach and we don't have more of a ongoing dialogue as we do with Eagle and Garfield, that perhaps we should restructure those and just the chair and the manager would meet with the corresponding chair and manager for those 2 districts.
One of the things we're running into, so particularly we've been trying to schedule for Gunnison, and they're having a really hard time finding a good slot for all of their board members to meet with us. And I think they would find it easier. They're really trying to figure out, well, what is the burning issue that we've got to deal with right now? Whereas I think we view it more as, well, there may be issues, but we really want to maintain the relationships, the lines of communication, talk about areas of common concern. Whereas when we're in the valley, it seems like it's just easier for us to set up to have full board discussions, and where those are easy. I think we should continue doing those, but maybe for some where we've had difficulty, I think because of distance and schedules and maybe lack of clarity about if there's a burning issue or not that would require the full board to get together, it may be easier for everyone and still achieve our goal of maintaining that connection, that as the chair rotates around, we would go over and have lunch with our counterparts and report back to you all.
Michael?
It's an interesting approach, John, because to choose the easy way rather than the hard way. And it seems to me that for this board, it wasn't about the issues so much as it was about meeting face to face with your peers, essentially peers, and not so much hearing about burning issues, and sometimes we do. But it was mostly about how you deal with your county. You know, the interesting thing about Lake County is that those commissioners take personal charge of various departments, really, and have a completely different approach from our management system. So learning those things and learning how they face their challenges, that was what was important. It was that face-to-face contact. So if we can't make it work, that's okay, it seems to me. You just make it work the next year or later or whenever. And if there are burning issues, both parties will make it work. So it was really about personal contact more than burning issues. And because we didn't know anything about Lake County, quite frankly, and had not treated it as a neighbor. And yet, in many ways, it's as close as Garfield County. I mean, it's right there. And so that's why we had that system. So that's the way I feel about it. If we can't make it, we can't make it. But face-to-face contact is what we were shooting for, not some sort of exchange at a higher level. So,
Steve?
I would favor continuing meeting face-to-face with them. I found out going to CCI meetings, I mean, one of the most valuable parts of that is meeting commissioners from different counties around the state, even though, you know, most of them are not even neighboring counties. And you never know when the contacts we make, these kind of things will
Blossom.
be important. If you have met the person face to face, it makes it a lot easier to, contact them about any issue whatsoever. Also, in terms of September 3rd, the time is just the same. If we are here to get in a car at 10 o'clock, it's the same as having an executive session, and here we're just juggling the schedule around as I see it.
Yeah, and we may have combined two issues too closely, because I think Lake County, that's been one where we've been just trying to set up. We haven't gotten as many questions about, well,
why?
It's difficult, and so I think our intention would be to meet with because the whole board of Lake County definitely wants to get together with you guys, and so it's more about timing, and so that's one question. I think it's where we're having some difficulty and time pressures, like with a Gunnison County. Instead of not meeting at all, if we can organize the whole board to whole board, would it be better instead of not meeting at all to see if the chair manager, which is an easier meeting to set up, quite frankly, for everyone, go over in those years. And Michael, I think we could combine that with, in years where we can get everyone together and that makes sense, have everyone go. But we're kind of building into it's either all of us go or nobody goes, and I think that may not be the best situation for relationships too.
Rachel?
Yeah, to separate the issue and talk about the kind of ongoing issue, I think maybe what we need to do is just not shoot for the full board. I think there's something in between just the manager and the chair versus everyone having their full board. And, you know, we're not going to fully have our full board on Tuesday, but, you know, post it as needed if you have a quorum, and if you don't have a quorum, you know, I could easily see the chair and one other, you know, and you have a little more of the face-to-face, or 2 or 3, you know, whoever, how many can actually make it, depending on the board. So I think maybe if we just lower the requirement of a successful meeting, that all 5 of us and all 5 of them are in the room, you know, without having to go all the way back down, because I do think, frankly, the local papers enjoy being able to cover the communication between the two, and, you know, once you get to that manager to manager and one commissioner, it's generally just a private meeting, not a public meeting. So, you know, I can see modifying it in the future and just saying, if they say, well, we can only have 2 out of the 5, say, well, that's okay this time. Next time we'll do more, and, you know, kind of do it like that and just see how many we can get each time and try to find, you know, good days early on. But for this one, I'm happy to change the schedule and leave here at 10 and do the executive stuff in the afternoon. Yeah, because we were already going to start meeting at 10. If we leave here at 10, we can be there at 11, come back by 2, and then we were already going to do other business when we got back anyhow.
We'll have to rearrange. Some of this will fall off anyway, which is...
Yeah, I mean, maybe membership reports or something.
Levels of interest. I don't know, because we'll have a fairly lengthy exec session. We've got our consultants coming up from Denver for that.
Okay.
And so it's a little more than just staff on that.
Well, are they able to come up in the afternoon instead of the morning?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. You know, I think we can rearrange Tuesday and make it happen.
Yeah.
You know, otherwise it'll probably fall off for the year if we can't.
Okay, we'll just make sure as we rearrange and we allow enough time for travel back and forth and recover before we go into what would be probably a lengthy exec session.
We'll try and keep it light, and maybe we should push off board membership reports for another week.
Yeah.
And keep it light on NOIs. There's 1 or 2 that I think need to come forward on that time frame, but we can make them quick.
Steve?
If we plan on leaving Twin Lakes at 1 to come back, we should be back by 2 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I think we should all see the subsidence problem on Independence Pass on their side. I was pretty shocked by it when I saw that one spot.
Yeah.
It could be a major problem developing there.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that, we might as well just sort of piggyback off of that in terms of our prep for
Lake County.
Lake County. So that could be one issue, the subsidence.
And we had that as a suggested topic. So we had 4 suggested topics. Just a debrief on the pro cycling, how that affected both counties this year, particularly obviously the leg that went over Independence Pass. We had the subsidence issues on Independence Pass, and they did fix one of those areas, and it looks like the area right behind it now is going into to subsidence. A discussion about our proposal for increased penalties for
truckers?
Vehicles over 35 feet, going over the pass. And then just I think the last one was a recognition of the Energy Smart revolving loan fund and the decision that, we made to make, I think, up to $50,000 of those funds available. I don't know if there are any other topics that...
Steve?
The commissioner at the CCI meeting mentioned, I told them how we've been extending the life of our landfill, and then he came up to me afterwards and said they have a landfill issue that, and I'm not quite sure what, but they indicated they would like to talk to us about a landfill question, and I don't know, it's just finding out what we've been doing or what exactly, but
Yeah, we can prepare something along those lines.
Okay, anything else? Rachel?
I don't know if talking about the CCI dues structure or something like that. I think there's been some changes that are going to be coming down the pike with that in terms of we've been frozen at a certain point, and so we've also allowed the middle range counties for evaluations. And as I understand it, the last time they reviewed the due structure, we were at a $1.4 billion evaluation or something like that. And now we're at $2.2 billion evaluation, and so it's going to change our rates. And they're kind of trying to come up with a more equitable formula. I don't know how it affects the very low end counties like these guys, but and it may or may not be a valuable topic. I just I don't know if they have other CCI issues, or we would like to ask for their support on, say, our senior tax exemption issue, because I'm sure they'd have members in their community that would benefit as well.
And I've got an update for you guys on that, an open discussion.
Okay.
Okay, I think that gives us enough meat for lunch.
The other thing that may come up is just Forest Service cutbacks, because we all are very dependent on Forest Service management issues. And with the wildfire budget this year, as I think everyone may have read, the Forest Chief has ordered all their districts to cut back to the tune of a total of $500 million so that they can continue the firefighting efforts. And they've run out of money in their firefighting budget. And next year's firefighting budget, to begin with, is supposed to be cut back by like another $200 million because of sequester. And, that is just something that we were lucky we haven't been hit with forest fires, but it may affect opening of campgrounds and maintenance of campgrounds and services pretty significantly. So that may be a decent topic.
Yeah, I mean, just follow up on that, what's interesting is when there's other natural disasters that occur throughout the country, whether it be hurricanes or tornadoes, those funds come out of FEMA funds. And for whatever reason, FEMA funds are not available for forest fires, which are a natural disaster as well. So the Forest Service budget has to pick up that difference.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure on that. I think some FEMA funds can be used where they are in non-Forest Service areas, so when you have that urban wildland interface. So there's probably a mix of funds. But one of the largest complaints is that the day you've put the fire out, FEMA is gone, and they don't help with flood preparation and mud and flood, which is the consequence afterwards for years afterwards. And so there's been some discussion about how to get federal legislation going that would allow FEMA funds to work for flood improvements as well.
So it might be good to get some traction support on that issue.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just going on with future agendas, the other change that's not reflected in your packets is September 10th in the afternoon. We're going to move things around a little bit so that we have about an hour to do a briefing on proposed recreational marijuana, proposed regulations. As we've been backing into our timeline for October 1st, we had originally thought September 11th was shaping up to be a light agenda. We're actually going to need to have a first reading on September 11th if we're going to stick to that October 1st kind of time frame. The proposal that we have coming forward, is based on the initial discussion that we had, and is going to be, I think, fairly similar with a few clarifying questions to the board to what we did with medical marijuana. So we feel like we can have time to both do a briefing on the 10th, get some feedback, come in on the 11th if there are some suggested changes to talk about those and really flesh those out for the second reading. So we'll be making those changes in the agenda.
Okay, anybody else have anything for future agendas?
I just have kind of a heads up, not for us so much, but if we're interested in having staff, I understand the Transportation Legislative Review Committee is doing a traveling tour in the western Colorado, and they're going to be meeting on the 11th in Glenwood Springs. And we have our noon regular, so I'm not suggesting any of us attend, but just wanted to put that out there in case Brian or anyone else wanted to make the contact with those folks. And they've been pulled in as legislators a little bit into this ongoing discussion about transportation funding ballot questions in 2014. So it'd just be interesting. They're going to be looking at the Glenwood Springs Bridge design, and it might be a chance to thank them for their help with the BRT project and the funding for the underpass and things like that. So.
Anybody else have anything for future agendas?
Just in case anyone wants to attend, to let them know, the River District is going to have its annual meeting in Grand Junction on the 13th, Friday the 13th of September, and that's from 9 to 3 p.m.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's one that, it's a $30 charge if we pay before a certain date, so, and I'm planning on going, and I think Rachel's planning on going, but if anybody else wants to, we need to get our reservations in so we can save some money on the registration.
Okay. All right, let's move on to open discussion.
Yeah, so I wanted to update the board because, and Steve will probably be able to jump onto this, but on our CCI legislative issues, particularly the senior property tax exemption, there's a lot of learning that happened and some modifications to what we actually ended up bringing to CCI that one I want to make sure everyone's up to speed on. Then Steve, maybe you can say what happened at the Western District meeting in relation to those. But as we continued doing research about the senior property tax exemption, one of our concerns going in was that seniors were unable to leverage their property for, like, rent out a room in their house or what have you, and leverage that income and still receive the property tax exemption, or that, in a more drastic sense, seniors or particularly disabled veterans who may need to receive care in a long-term facility could lose their property tax exemptions. And so those were some of the areas that we were trying to address. And we had originally suggested a large fix that would have required a constitutional amendment, and it came back, and we decided that probably wasn't going to be a real feasible strategy, and so we really started to focus on the income side. Well, one of the things that we learned was that there actually is no prohibition. There's a little bit of a misunderstanding on seniors, if they're living in their home, renting out rooms or those sorts of things. They can actually still keep the property tax exemption. It took quite a few discussions to kind of get to that interpretation, but in fact, when you look at the applications and such, there's no way to collect information on whether you're collecting that kind of income. And so our issue narrowed down quite a bit. In order for seniors to be able to rent out their homes if they need care through a long-term care facility, that also, it turns out, would require a constitutional amendment. So it narrowed us down a little bit more, and so the issue really turned into one for disabled veterans. And it turned into a question of whether the definition for disabled veterans doesn't have the same residency requirements in the Constitution that seniors do. That's really written in to the statute. And so the question that we really raised was, could primary residence be extended to disabled veterans who require care in long-term facilities, who may at some point come back to their home, they may not, we don't know. Could they maintain that benefit because, by virtue of their disability and such, we can assume that they may have limited income generating opportunities and such. And so we ended up really narrowing that CCI issue to avoid constitutional amendments and to address the problem that was there that we originally started talking about. And all that was happening really the day before Steve left for the Mountain District meeting, as we were clarifying all of this. We also clarified that regarding switching to Independence Pass, that in fact Independence Pass is the only pass with such a strict length limitation on it of the Colorado passes. There are a number of high mountain passes that have oversize, overweight. By far Independence Pass was the most restrictive, so we kind of left it open to, you know, do we have legislation just to address Independence Pass as the most restrictive, or if other counties wanted to jump on and increase penalties for other high mountain passes. And then Steve and I haven't had a chance to debrief, but I wanted to make sure everyone was up to speed on what our discussions actually were and what actually went forward. And then Steve brought those to the Mountain District meeting.
Steve and Rachel?
First of all, on the Independence Pass issue, there were 2 other instances in the state where they have problems with truckers. One was an overweight issue. The other was the hazmat materials in Summit County, went over the passes or wanting to go through the tunnel. And so, you know, I think that the bill could be broadened to include more than just Independence Pass. There seemed to be interest in doing that. In terms of length restriction, the next most restrictive pass, the length is 70 feet instead of 35. So
Double.
it's not the length is not an issue for anybody else really, except for Independence Pass. But the weight and the hazmat and the oversized kind of things could be a problem. In terms of the senior property tax exemption issue, and most of the issues at the Mountain District meeting, the information was put out just for informational purposes, and there was very little discussion about most of the issues on the table. And this turns out there was really no response from anybody on our thing. It was more, you know, I put out the issues there, and it really boils down to just, you know, very narrow issue that we can do a legislative fix this year. The things that really would help our seniors here are all constitutional amendments, including the 10-year residency requirement is in the Constitution. And the instance where if a senior wanted to downsize in Aspen, sell their bigger home, move into a smaller home, that would disqualify them from the possibility of the senior property tax exemption, because they would have moved into a different home in the 10 years. They'd have to start the 10 years over again. So I put it out there to CCI that we might be interested in a future year of pursuing a constitutional amendment, but figured it was a big issue and it'd take a lot of educational and lobbying kind of things to make that happen that aren't going to happen this year.
Rachel?
Thanks for the report back on that meeting. I have a couple of thoughts, and one is that I'm not sure who to get it from, but we certainly should get a written interpretation of those rules, as you said, that it's been clarified. But if we want Marty Ames and these folks giving seniors direction and the blessing, it should be backed up by some official who has signed off and said, yes, you're correct, you can earn some income from your residence, and just make sure we have that in our files as a CYA. And the second thought is that while I know that constitutional amendments are fairly large, I think that if this was taken to the Veterans Affairs Committee, it might be something that really would have a lot of positive momentum behind it, of what can Colorado do to assist disabled veterans. And, there are often a lot of referred measures that are constitutional changes or whatever that pass without a big campaign. We all look at the ballot and it can be 20, 25 questions long. And so I wouldn't want to necessarily narrow our goals too much until we had started to talk to the Veterans Affairs Committee and see, you know, what it was about in the state, you know, if that's something that we could get for them to be able to earn income by renting their home while they're in a long-term care facility.
And that's actually one of the things CCI is already doing for us. Jenny Pigeonneau is reaching out
Okay.
to veterans groups that they work with on legislation to do both those things, check scope, as well as is our proposed solution one that they could support,
Yeah.
basically, or is it the right fix at this point? So CCI is doing some of that work because that was one of our questions, and they've already got some good connections.
Okay, well, I'm sure they'll report back to us in the October meeting and, you know, what direction they think they should take it. But, you know, a lot of those do pass fairly easily because they're kind of charter cleanups type of measures. And then on Independence Pass, I don't know if Dan Gibbs was attending on behalf of Summit County, but
All three of their commissioners were there.
oh, that's great, because, you know, Dan is chair of CCI's Transportation Subcommittee and then has so much history in the legislature with transportation issues that he would probably have the best sense of how to get something truly passed on this. You know, in a way, if it's Independence Pass only, it's a pretty narrow question. Once you start getting into hazmat and larger overweight, and I'm not saying we should exclude them, you start bringing the, you know, Truckers Association in, and, you know, they sometimes they work well with others, and sometimes they just exert more power. But in a way, it's good news that we're the only one with the length restriction, and, you know, they could perhaps craft a very narrow fix for us. So I think just reaching out to Dan Gibbs and, you know, others with transportation interests, I'd love to see them take this forward. So those are my major thoughts on that.
Okay, any other comments? Okay. Is that it for you?
You know, just a real quick note for the board. I did get some time to go and tour our projects around the AABC, and we've got a lot of work going on there as GR's been updating us. But it may be worthwhile if there are board members who are interested for us to set up a time to bring one or two of you down at a time, just because of the safety requirements. There's a lot of equipment and such moving, but if you have an interest, we can try and get something set up. It's pretty impressive to see the settling pond structures, you know, the energy dissipators and such that are being put in there, as well as the tunnel. GR will, next time he's in, be bringing in some pictures so you guys can see the progress. We continue to struggle a little bit with our schedule, as we've reported in the past. We're working with the contractor to meet critical deadlines for this winter on the underpass, and of course we had some delays through our partnership with the sand and water districts and getting their infrastructure in before we laid asphalt. But we'll have that project done. In the AABC, you know, this winter we'll have at least the asphalt laid. But it'd be good if you wanted to get a little tour and see the amount of work that's going on down there, and it may point to the need to throw a little party for the citizens who've been impacted during this major summer of construction in that area.
Okay, good.
And that's all I've got for you.
Yeah, Rachel?
Yeah, well, it's kind of harking back to future agendas, but I should just let you guys know. Thursday, September 26th, and Friday, 27th, the State Interim Water Committee is going to be having meetings down at the State House under, you know, Gail Schwartz's leadership, and they're going to be particularly talking about the way that she would like to improve and act further on Senate Bill 19 and water ag efficiencies. So I'm planning on attending those. Just in case you were looking for a Thursday to schedule a meeting, I'm not going to be here on the 26th, you know, or the 27th.
And then I apologize, I actually had one more thing on future agendas too, which was that our abatement hearings this Thursday have both been canceled, so we'll just have the EOTC meeting still. We had and a family emergency in one. They'll be rescheduled probably for late September, and then another that's decided not to pursue the abatement. So
Right, then will we have if we want to carpool, will we have a pickup, let's say, at the Intercept lot for the EOTC meeting on Thursday?
we can certainly arrange that.
Like, I would meet at the Intercept lot to pick up a ride up.
Yeah, we'll work that through Charlotte and get an email out to you guys.
Okay.
I'll probably just drive over the divide from my house to go there.
Okay. Anybody else have anything for open discussion? Seeing none, I guess we will adjourn a little early so we can get set up for our annual employee anniversary picnic. And we'll be back here at 1 o'clock.
And improving those with future plantings, etc. Also adopted as part of the master plan, the airport master plan, is a set of design intent specifications for signs. This document includes an inventory of the existing signs and recommendations regarding how signs at the airport should be replaced, improved, including sort of some general thoughts about where new signage is needed or where existing signs need to be improved, as well as, and again, without trying to singe Rob, some really detailed drawings showing the design for signs, the construction details, installation, et cetera, et cetera. I will tell you that much of this work has been done, and one of the things that we can talk about during the design guidelines is whether or not this palette of sign materials, colors, et cetera, is still something that we want to maintain going forward. Then there's a 2012 Aspen Airport Community Plan update, which is a very broad, aspirational document that includes a number of key policy statements relative to the airport, which you see in items 1 through 6 at the bottom of this slide. One of the more important recommendations of that plan was the recommendation to create the West of Maroon Creek Plan, which has been going on for about the last year and a half, and as I understand it, is going to be done and ready for adoption December? October? October. And the airport has participated with the Planning Commission and the Community Development Department on that, and we can help you understand the contents of that document, which some of the major recommendations are shown on this slide. It's a little bit different document than the ACP. It's a more comprehensive land use plan. It's going to have an actual future land use map. It is probably the document that's going to be most important when any project that's going to be developed at the airport comes forward for actual construction. One of the last sort of reviews is called a location and extent review, and this document will be very important in the context of reviewing location and extent. And the plan does include a set of scenic guidelines which address in a fair amount of detail landscaping, lighting, signage, and so forth. And so these are guidelines that we're going to want to understand and make sure that we don't run contrary to and try and maintain the spirit of those when we do the guidelines for the airport. The Highway Access Control Plan, this was a plan that was approved last year as well, and its primary import really was to sort of set the locations for access for the airport when we were looking at the airport master plan update and specifically how to redesign the terminal area. And it recommends that we maintain this current fully controlled access at Baltic Avenue, and that there be a future fully controlled access at this location, which is directly across from the ProBuild site, just up valley of the Baltic Avenue, and that this access, which is across from Service Center Road and provides access to the Atlantic Aviation Terminal area and parking, be continued to provide access as well. The airport has recently completed an airport wildlife hazard management plan, and the purpose of this document, fundamentally speaking, is to ensure that the airport is a safe place for operating aircraft, and we have had a number of bird strikes and such over time, and over the last decade or so, the FAA has increased its emphasis on managing wildlife for the benefit and the safety of operating aircraft. There are a number of important recommendations that we've selected for you to consider during the design guidelines process, and one of them is this recommendation number 3 that talks about modifying the landscape master plan because it includes some recommendations that involve landscape materials that might be considered bird attractants or wildlife attractants. So these are the kind of things that we'll be looking at in the design guidelines to make sure that where modifications need to be done, they can be done. So I'm going to turn it over momentarily to J.D. Ingram to talk about FAA standards. Then I've got a couple slides at the end that I'll talk to, and then we'll commence discussion.
We could just pause to make sure if there's any clarifying questions that you'd like to cover in Tim's portion, we should do that. Otherwise, we're ready to jump ahead.
Everybody okay? All right, great. Thank you, Tim.
Great. Well, I'm going to shift and talk about the exciting world of federal regulations. Who doesn't love to talk about the federal regulation?
Don't turn the lights down.
I'm going to make this as painless as possible and go through it as quickly as possible. The intent of this is just to provide the framework to let everybody know that there are, when you work on airports, they're very active, they're very complex, and they're federally regulated. So what we want to do as a task force and a committee is understand what those regulations are and then work within them. And we were talking about this morning. The purpose of the slides that I'm going to go through, that's going to be the measuring stick. So when the design guidelines come out, we're going to use the work products and measure them up to make sure they're compatible with federal regulations. And my role working with Tim and our role is to make sure that you have all the support that you need as you go through this so that we are operating everything in the sandbox the way we need to play. So a couple of the biggest areas that the federal government regulates on airports is safety. Where buildings are located, runways, taxiways, all have safety areas related to them, object-free zones. You just can't haphazardly put anything on an airport that you want to. There's so much regulation that mandates what can be put where. The master plan process that you went through actually worked through a lot of your facility locations. So a lot of this work, the pre-planning work, has been done. When we shift away from runways and taxiways, the next closest thing to the center line of the airport is typically the apron areas. And Commissioner Ittner and I were talking about this before the meeting today, is one of the things that is really important at this particular airport in your backyard is the slope of the ground. The airport has a 2% slope tied to it. So as you start to create apron environments, ramps where aircraft park, those have to be flat areas. And actually 2% may feel flat, but when you're fueling aircraft and taxiing aircraft, it needs to be 1%. So there's some challenges there that have been evaluated in the master plan and the terminal area plan. But aprons are very important. Control towers, having line of sight to aircraft on any of the movement areas like runways and taxiways, being able to see those airplanes is important, so we can't have structures blocking them. Going in a little bit deeper as we get closer to the terminal, airport terminal facilities, the FAA has guidelines of how to do that stuff, and as Jim stated, this task force and this study is not about designing facilities, but I will touch on the things that the FAA looks at when they do design facilities. Forecasting, peak demands, and part of the conversation was the use of the airport in peak season drives, the sizing, and the capacity. All that will be evaluated in the design phase if and when that goes forward, but that's not part of the design guidelines. They go on and look at functional relationships of terminals, where the major components are, gates, taxi positions, that type of stuff. As you go deeper into the terminal building, you have TSA requirements, and I have a slide on that. And then I would say ancillary facilities, parking, circulation, roadway. Some of the things that you are going to be considering is the airport is the front door to the community for those traveling by air. And it's an important statement. And I think this committee is going to get to put their fingerprints all over what that experience is going to feel like and be. Part 77 is a federal regulation that deals with safety, and everything that the FAA deals with is safe and efficient air travel, and that's also part of the core values of this community. Part 77 is like a bubble that protects the airport for airspace. So it evaluates all the approach surfaces, so that buildings don't penetrate, terrain doesn't penetrate, that type of stuff. And lastly is TSA. TSA has their own guidelines and recommendations for airport security and how airports are planned and designed, and we will be supporting you on any interface that this group has with TSA regulations.
Okay, so the next few slides are just to talk briefly about the aspects of the Pitkin County Code. There are two titles in particular that are applicable to the work that we'll be doing. The first one is called Title 10, and that is essentially the standards and guidelines in the code that govern the airport. And it is divided into two major sections. One is general and the other one is minimum standards. In the general section, you see on this slide the kinds of things that are addressed in that part of the code: safety, sanitation, hours of operation, noise, fueling, et cetera, et cetera. And these are sort of the fundamental guidelines to make sure that the airport operates efficiently, safely, serves the public as it is intended to do. The second section, called Division 2, is standards that relate to how commercial aeronautic activities occur at the airport. And it's really intended to create an even playing field for those aeronautical services that an airport provides to its community. It's different for every community in terms of what kinds of things are provided or what kind of things the community residents seek out. But for example, these are common uses are air taxi, training, aircraft rental, fuel sales, and some of the information in this section is general and operational in nature, and others of it is very specific, like for fuel farms specifying a minimum tank size for fuel storage. So these are going to be things that we're also going to want to understand at least to some level, so that we make sure that if there is an area that we cross into that's governed by this section of the code, that we'll be aware of that. The last one is Title 11, which is the county's building and construction code, and obviously this applies to all the construction development of all structures at the in the county as well as at the airport. Its fundamental purpose is to ensure safety, that buildings are designed in accordance with building codes. The Pitkin County Building Code happens to be based on the International Building Code of 2009. One aspect of the building code, which I think is going to be perhaps significant for this project, is going to be the International Energy Conservation Code, and as much as there's a potential for the terminal area building to include photovoltaic systems, et cetera. So that's going to be something we'll want to understand. To some extent, we're going to be looking to the architects on the committee who have a deep understanding of how this code works and for interpretations and so on and so forth. But suffice it to say that this is the last step before a building gets built, and we're going to want to make sure that anything that we put in the standards doesn't run contrary to that code. So lastly, we have a list of issue areas, which we have begun These are not necessarily comprehensive, but it was a good beginning point for us to start talking about what do we want to address with the standards document. So you look at quality of experience and you see aesthetics and convenience, pedestrian accessibility, taking advantage of views from facilities, in particular the terminal building at the airport, making sure that the facilities at the airport aren't visually imposing on the adjacent roads. One of the things that we heard most commonly during the master plan project was that if we're going to do a new terminal building at the airport, that we should try and make it not too unlike the building that's there, that it sort of lays down into the landscape. It is not in sort of an omnipresent building that looms over the highway that's a huge architectural statement. And so this is going to provide us sort of the background for considering what elements, characteristics, factors are we going to look at during the process of developing the design guidelines. So I wouldn't mind if everyone would sort of look at the items on this list, and here I'd like to pause and give us an opportunity to discuss these issue areas and hear your thoughts about whether or not this list seems appropriate, comprehensive, if there's something missing. And then I'd also like to, after we've done that, to pop back to the core values, look at that slide for a moment, and then at the end chat about your thoughts about comparable airports for purposes of looking at those surveys of comparable airports for the surface transportation portion of the study.
All right, thanks, Tim. So anything that we see that is missing that we'd like to add or consider, Michael?
Well, I think initially, Jeff mentioned it, how do we guarantee that this is a document that doesn't waste the committee's time and that is an enduring document that takes our recommendations forward and that we use over time? And that was a challenge. How do we do that?
Well, there are a couple ways. One of them was discussed in our proposal, where when we talk about how this document is implemented, and one of those thoughts was that a committee would be set up at the airport that would consist of perhaps a participant from airport administration, a participant from tenants, perhaps a volunteer from the community, an architect or planner, and that they would be responsible for doing essentially what you could almost call like a homeowners association design review process for projects that come in that are going to be constructed at the airport. So that document would be the fundamental core tool that they would use in a design review process. We also talked about the fact that whenever the airport does improvements at the facility, we're required to go through a location and extents review. That process is typically fairly far along. It's at least through conceptual design, and that anyone who was doing work on behalf of the airport designing a facility would use this document as part of their conceptual design process, so that by the time we got to a location and extents review, it would have incorporated the recommendations of this document.
So what you're saying is that it is going to be placed on a shelf. There will be an active lifetime document that will guide us from.
That's correct. It's actually going to have an implementation chapter that's going to talk about some of these things and changes to it and how it grows and is used.
Yeah.
The other thing that I really couldn't find here was although it's implied, it's user experience, is traveler experience, and some value applied to that. These are essentially local concerns, the massing, the aesthetics, but what's it going to be like for a disembarking passenger?
Right.
I don't think that's high enough in this order here.
Okay.
Yeah, if I could just piggyback off of that. I know we talked about this during the master plan process, but in terms of looking at transportation options, I think some of that would go to Michael's concerns.
Yeah, because I mean, you could have alternate transportation methods that nobody's going to use. I mean, or that are just not convenient for the user. So So it seems to me you have to analyze those from the user's point of view.
Right.
Is it going to be used?
Rob?
In looking at the core values and the issue areas, it seems to me like there's a big gap, which is supporting the prosperous economy of our community. I mean, we touch on the experience, we touch on all these different things, but let's face it, the airport is our biggest economy driver here. And I think in everything that we do throughout the design process, we have to talk about how this is going to support our prosperous economy. You know, and with balance of the other things that have been mentioned. But I'm really almost in shock that that's not in here at all.
You know, I gotta say something right now, because you guys have all three said stuff that really is kind of against how I feel, being a neighbor right there. And, you know, this is a busy airport from our perspective, and it has got a lot going on, and I just want to keep it high on the list, that the people that live there are extremely important in this process, because we actually live there, we're not passing through, we're not driving by, we actually live there. So I just want to make sure that stays high on the list.
And I think, bouncing back on Rob, I think he did talk about a balance. You know, understanding it is an economic driver for the community, but there has to be a balance in there. I think that's what Rob was getting
My
at.
employees that work here that need passengers coming in for their jobs.
Well,
Everybody's connected to somebody in the economy
You're
working
busy.
here.
I'm actually going to go back to the core values, because these are really good points, and I want to make sure that we all have that up on the screen to inform this discussion. So I think if you look at the first 2 points, maintain a safe and efficient airport, retain environmental sensitivity, noise, air quality, that gets to, you know, the airport's key responsibility. But I think the one about the economy is something that's not well stated here. So,
Other thoughts? Rachel?
Yeah, I could see emphasizing within the core values just the term, you know, minimizing impact on neighborhoods. I mean, maybe that's under environmental sensitivity, where we're already talking about noise, air quality, transit, things like that. But I do agree that should be kept in the forefront. I also agree with Rob as, you know, putting up there one of the purposes of the airport. So I guess I'm back on issue areas where you started. But, and this tags off of some of the comments that Michael made as he used the term passenger experience. I've used this term before, but I think we need to think as the group about what type of amenities we would like to see within the airport for that passenger experience,
Right.
so that when it goes to design, there is space for them, and we're not just saying, oh, well, this kind of kiosk could fit over there in that corner, or this could go over here. You know, whatever those amenities are that we would like to provide, we should be talking about those early on so they can be designed in. And the second thing is, I just had picked up on in one of the standards and screening documents you'll be using, was minimum ADA requirements. And I would like to think about, you know, what are, I don't know if it's maximum ADA requirements, but what are, you know, more than minimal. Because we have an aging population as a country, and the more I travel, I certainly see more and more injured veterans traveling. And I want to make sure that we're thinking very fully, and someone come back and say, wow, that was the easiest airport we've ever traveled in with Grandma, or that was the easiest airport to get in and out of with those sort of things. So let's go for more than that. I also kind of wonder if under the issues areas, and I know there's the transportation task force over here and this group here, but to make sure they're fully integrated as we get to the end of this. So under issue areas, I would certainly see transportation connection, circulation being an issue area, so that they really work together well.
Other thoughts or comments? It could be from the committee as well. Yeah.
How much, in terms of coming up with a series of design guidelines, how much are we going to know as a committee, or how much will be informed by a program that's already defined? I mean, it occurred to me, listening to Rachel's comment, in terms of amenities or other things, I don't know if program elements would really affect or drive design or design guidelines. They will certainly drive design.
Right.
Don't know if they're going to drive design guidelines, but will we have much information to work with?
Well, we'll have the airport master plan, which from a gross standpoint provides program based on forecast need.
Right.
So we'll know something about, the types of facilities that we're talking about, a general arrangement that has been studied. But when you get down to the detail level, like how is baggage handling going to be done? No, we're not going to have that level of detail.
So kind of internal programming for the building we won't really have.
That's right.
Okay.
I mean, we have identified through the master plan sort of a list of the essential functions and some idea of square footages, but those are really general, and we expect that information is going to be modified, developed, refined during the design process.
Okay. If I may, Chair, to follow up. Separate question, but already touched upon in your presentation. With all of the various guidelines already referred to, specifically on the federal regulations that already apply, are you going to provide summary of those to us? Because obviously whatever we might craft are going to have to nest under those guidelines. So will we get copies, or I've seen the CFRs, I know how complicated they are. Do we get a synopsis of them? How do we know what that framework is?
Well, there's two ways that we imagine doing that. We'll make whatever information you feel compelled to review available to you, and answer any questions that may flow out of whatever, cursory review you may have time to conduct along those lines.
Okay.
We will also do a summary. We've done somewhat of a summary on a few of them here today. But we'll, in our next, probably in our next task force meeting, we'll be going over some of those industry standards and that sort of thing. We also expect that when we come back to you with a draft of the standards, we are going to have done a first cut that's going to sort of be compatible with aviation standards. We're going to have to give you a head start on some of that. That's how we anticipate addressing that.
JD or Tim, how does that work? Because our airport currently has what you may think of as a variance, per se, by the FAA in terms of how the runway is and the setbacks. And so when we start to, even with the approval of the master plan, when we start to look at the potential for a second FBO and the designs, the process has to go back to the FAA to determine what they will allow. Explain that variance that the airport is currently under, which is a little unusual, I think.
But before I turn this to JD, who's more the expert on the variance process, let me just say that I think it's unlikely that the design standards that we'll be doing will be affected by the grosser level of influence that the aviation standards will be. That spacing between the runway and the taxiway is an important element of how the airport functions and works. But the design guidelines themselves probably won't influence that kind of a issue too much.
Okay.
We'll be on a little bit finer grain detail than that. If that makes sense. If it doesn't, let me know and I'll take another shot at it.
Okay.
To answer your question on the modifications to standards, the airport has an approved ALP, and there are conditions to the approval of that ALP. But on that ALP, it considers all those separation standards, all those modifications to standards that you're talking about. So they're pre-planned and they're approved by the FAA. They either grant the modification or they don't. But all of that information is contained in the ALP. and within the master plan. And a lot of the stuff that you mentioned, David, is contained. There is a lot of groundwork that's been done in terms of planning. Planning level work been done in the master plan, which is a great place to start.
Listen?
So my comment and questions come from the perspective of I'm also a minority business owner of the businesses within the terminal. So there's the restaurant, there's a kiosk inside TSA, there's the small retail store inside and outside TSA. So when Rachel Michael talk about traveler amenities, I think of the restaurant and the bar and the retail. So when I look at some of the issue areas and the core values, I think of kind of design guidelines that we will be developing for what it looks like on the outside. Are we going to be, you kind of talked about, there are some general thoughts as to square footages and based upon forecasting what kind of square footage you need for a retail store, how many retail stores, or things like that. But as has happened with the terminal today, those kinds of things are just kind of pigeonholed in there and kind of squeezed out. They're not, some of them, one of them is not very visible to passengers. There's no security for the restaurant and the bar at all when the airport terminal is starting to shut down. So are those kinds of things that I can gather information and bring to the task force that we can put into this?
And that would be
or are
wonderful.
we only looking on the outside?
No, we're not. We'll be looking largely on the outside because they're the sort of factors that we will have enough information to grapple about. Again, we're not going to be doing design of the terminal building, so there's a whole lot of programmatic information and square footage evaluation and relationship information that's really going to have to be left to the design process. But there are some things that I can imagine, for example, we will talk about. Like the building should take advantage of these views. Or we should give a higher priority to non-private vehicular access in our circulation system, or the kinds of things that will influence how the building works on the inside somewhat. But we won't have the level of detail information, I think, to get at the specific sort of question that you were asking, Liz. But any information that you can bring to the table for consideration may lead us in a direction that could be productive and helpful.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, when we were getting ready to go to bed to begin this process, I had brought up the quote question of amenities, and it's not so much that they're going to be designing amenities, but while you have these great brains together and travelers, it's a chance to at least list them out as to these are the things we would expect to see in an interior of an operating healthy facility. And so it's not to detail what type of diaper changing facilities we need in the restroom, but that literally to just say that we would like to see restrooms that aren't cramped and crowded and you don't bang your suitcase into the door trying to get down the hall, and they're handicapped accessible and so on and so forth. So it wasn't really to start designing the amenities, but to really at least be able to detail the type of amenities that we would expect for passenger experience and things like that.
Will the committee look at, when it comes to design, and you talked about the quality of the experience in the interior setup, the needs of the airlines and the ability to go out and look for new and different service? So the industry sees an advantage in providing service to the airport?
I think I'm going to turn that one to Jim.
George, let me make sure I understand your question. Will we be targeting key points here to make it more appealing for airlines to operate at our airport?
Yes.
I think it fits under the amenity discussion that just took place. And we should be gathering, as I think Rachel said it really well, we've got this creative brain trust. I think we want to make sure that we can incorporate it, if nothing else, in notes and appendix information to help us for whatever step is in front of us next.
Rob?
I'm just curious, because I've seen a couple of committees like this come together for various things, and the budgetary aspects of things come into play far afterwards. And when we talk about, well, we want larger bathrooms, we'd love, marble floors, we'd love, 100% plus, I'm just saying,
I never said marble floors.
I was talking earlier about another airport that had a very grandiose entrance to it, and, we talk about meeting 110% of ADA compliance, not just 100%. Those things cost money, and when we spend money on that, we're not spending money on something else. So what aspect does this committee take into account the budgetary aspects of things, in the sense that we can't have everything?
Right.
Because that's important too, because we could sit here all day saying, I want this, 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 and then we can't afford it.
Yeah. The best way I think I can answer this is that first of all, the guidelines are called the guidelines for a reason. They're not going to be cast in stone. They're not going to make you do anything. And also, the outcome of this process will essentially allow and require the creativity of those who come after to work on these projects, to come up with a solution that meets your budget, that accomplishes the design guideline, the intent of that design guideline. We're not going to be ratcheting anything down so tightly that we're going to be costing you money by virtue of the statements that are in this document.
I think Jim can maybe piggyback off.
Can I just follow up quick before you go, Jim? I guess I think it's important somewhere in this document, or at least through the process, to state and restate that budgetary impact comes in a later design process, and things may be cut because of that later design. So if you're, the comment that was made by Jeff about, I hope this doesn't just sit on a shelf and you follow our guidelines. Well, if you're not taking the budgetary aspects into account, we may not be able to follow your guidelines. So I just think that awareness is important as part of this process, that we as county commissioners, taking a guiding document and putting it into a policy-making decision, we account for a lot more than what that guiding document is guiding us towards. I think that's important to have stated somewhere in this document.
Jim?
Rob, I think you're right on the mark. Obviously, the challenge is always what comes first, and how do you incorporate those pieces together. I think we have the opportunity to kind of help prioritize some of these issues as we look at them and say, we see this as a high priority to the extent that money can support, and that we keep that point in front of us. The challenge is that ultimately, if and when we decide to go forward with terminal detailed design, it's going to be one of those, we don't want to get it open, cut the ribbon, and go, gosh, we probably could have got this a little better if we'd seen it coming. So trying to keep those creative thoughts coming forward can help us ultimately make prioritization. Value engineering choices is the cutting word in project management, but if we hadn't thought about them, they can't sit against all the other priorities that we may look at in a structure, be it a terminal or something else.
I think Steve and Rachel.
I think about two different airports that have done major building things, one being DIA, where the Anschutz family picked the perfect site for the airport, where they could put in anything they wanted just the way they wanted to do it. They got everybody trained now to drive to DIA in their cars because they didn't build the light rail thing there at the beginning, even though maybe that was part of the grand scheme of things. Now they're putting it in, everybody's used to their cars, and now they're going to have to try to train people to take the light rail instead of that. And I think if they'd put that in their design, saying that the public transportation interface is the most important, and we need to do a mass transit thing as the main way to get people out there, that could have totally changed how DIA turned out. So kind of the emphasis that's put on the different things is important. Now they're putting it in, there's great construction things going on that reroutes the traffic trying to drive into TIA because they're adding their new hotel terminal there and the light rail thing. With a little better foresight, they probably could have avoided a lot of that. You look at the Santa Barbara airport, and they have a very low-tech baggage handling system for delivering it to the customers. And Jim, you told me that was because they ran out of money. And maybe they'll add that in later. So they have this really nice looking terminal. And maybe the passengers are maybe fine with the baggage system the way it is. I don't know, but it almost seems like you're right, they ran out of money and they didn't quite finish the project the way they had intended it. So I think keeping a balance between all of the different elements. Now we have our perfect location for the airport that probably Tom Sardi or somebody was the one who decided that's where our airport should go. And if we consider, or if you as a committee consider that we have the perfect site for an airport, and what do we want to have on that site, kind of ignoring everything that's there already, what would you come up with? And if we can keep that kind of a vision, I think that would be good to try to get the airport that the community likes and wants and needs.
Rachel, then John?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the process from here once this group has finished its work and we've all come to agreement. And I would assume that at whatever point we'll go to perhaps a design competition. And, we may select a vendor based on qualifications and go straight that way, but may do a design competition. And this is kind of to Rob's question, that's where those teams would take the full body of work, and it would be their creativity and their ability to present a design that says, well, we really emphasized A, B, and C, and another team might say we emphasize C, D, and F and in it. And so I think that it might be a worthwhile exercise to go through some weighting criteria with your committee so that afterwards you could say, well, we've got this big ball of wax now, and if we had to start winnowing it down, what would we put as our top priorities, our medium priorities, our nice to have, or these could be phased in later, so that we could work within a budget and do a little bit of a weighting process. So that was on that point. And the other item I just would mention is that TSA requirements are mentioned in our packet. And I think at some level you're kind of thinking about the exterior TSA and the security and what they require and what they're going to need for passenger security and safety. But we really should think about the flexibility and adaptability of TSA within the airport, because they seem to change the protocols every couple of years, the equipment they want to use every couple of years. And if there's anything that's a bad customer experience, it's like trying to hop on one foot and not have enough run out to collect your stuff, and people are no place to sit down to put your belt back on, and so I want to make sure that we really are thoughtful about that screening process, and that we are adaptable and flexible to whatever those requirements may be in the future.
John?
I wanted to thank Tim and Jim and the commissioners for inviting me to sit on the task force. But unfortunately I have a meeting across on the other side of the road I could not get out of, so I have to leave early, but I promise to get caught up and attend all the rest of them to their full extent. I particularly enjoyed sitting between
On the other side of the table.
That would happen in my career, but it's been good.
What do you mean by that?
It's been good.
So, Tim, the other question you would ask us to give you feedback on is looking at comparable airports, and what do you mean by that?
I'm going to let Bob talk to that for a minute.
Well, You know, there's a lot of characteristics that define these airports, from size, number of employments, number of operations at the airport, those sorts of things. But I think really what we want to get at, I don't think we should limit it to small versus large or anything like that. I think what we'd like to know is, what airports have you been to where the arrival experience or the departure experience has been particularly pleasant, specifically as it relates to getting from your ultimate place of destination to and from the airport. Because our intent is to, one, try to create a questionnaire that we can send out to these airports, but then follow up with phone calls and talk to them about what has been their experience. What have they done that they think has been extremely successful? What have they done that hasn't been so successful? I think we can learn a lot from that as well. So I think the main thing is, what are the characteristics that you want to achieve at your airport here? And whether it's because you're a destination resort or because it's a municipal airport that you take great pride in. And think about airports where they might have a similar type of interest and where you've maybe experienced a good arrival pattern. Ease of access. Once you arrived, you could get to your destination, whether that be downtown or someplace else in the community. So I don't really think we want to just say it should be other mountain resort communities. Could very easily be other types of resort communities, could be other sorts of communities, could be big airports where you've had really good experiences, because there might be something there that could be applicable in our situation here.
Yeah, I mean,
So I think it's wide open at this point.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting because if at some point we actually go ahead and design a new terminal, there's very few new terminals, airports being built in the country. Most of them are old, they're outdated, they don't work well. So it's hard to come up with models. I mean, DIA is probably one of the newer airports that have been built in the last 20 years.
Well, and on that point, we don't think we should limit it to in the country.
Right.
There may be some great European examples that we could borrow from, and that's something that we want to do if it's appropriate.
You know, when you think about...
Pardon?
I'll get right to you. When you think about flying into Geneva, and you get there and you've got your transportation
First thing
right
you see is a
downstairs.
train.
You've got your trains right there, you've got your buses. I mean, everything's so simple. It all works and all flows.
Yep.
Rachel?
That's a similar comment to mine, because the comparable airports is not about the rest of the body of the design guidelines, it's about the transportation element, as I understand it.
Right.
And so what really struck me is that I don't know that we should limit our scope for successful transportation models just to airports. You know, there probably are train stations where people still arrive in large numbers, depart going all sorts of different directions. How do they make mass transit work? There could be train stations, there could be university programs.
Disney.
I mean, Disney, it's true, but when we first looked to the entrance to Aspen and things like that, we really talked to the people at Disney who are used to moving 50,000 people a day around, in their place. So I just wouldn't necessarily limit it to airport only for what have been successful mass transit programs and what have encouraged the use of that transit, as opposed to and what are the barriers to using that transit. And I had down looking at European models as well. So that's my major thing on there. But I do think that whatever information we're able to gather, the baggage handling is the key component to making a transportation system work. And there has to be consideration of, whether it's loading on the buses or, unloading or however. But the baggage handling, how does it get to you, is going to make the transportation system work. And then I would assume, but I'm not sure because of the shorthand on the list, but we would be incorporating a RAFTA planner in that study work. I mean, because that is our transportation system. So I would imagine we're going to be interfacing with what RAFTA thinks it can or cannot deliver, or what would it take for it to deliver different levels of mass transit services. Thank you.
John?
I want to talk about just a little bit, I've been doing a lot of traveling lately, and mostly through Europe and all that. But I also want to talk about when you land in Aspen, what says we're landed in Aspen. And part of that is you land in Frankfurt, you land in Munich, you know, a lot of that, you don't know where you're at. You're coming in, you're bleary-eyed, and yes, the transportation is important, and I wrote down Geneva because that was one of the airports I landed through, and I was like, there's the train, boom, I go right downtown, there's my hotel. It was easy, easy, easy. But the transportation is important, but it also is when we come off the plane or a user comes off the plane, what says Aspen? And you have the word small town feel, and I wrote, well, how does that work? But how does it say Aspen? How do you know you're landing in Aspen besides a big sign? How does that give you that feel? You know, is it a view? Is it a framed view of Highlands Bowl or something? Or is it the natural sunlight that you allow to cascade into the building, deep in the building, so you're not sitting in a hole? You know, things like that I think we need to address in these design standards. Say, you know, we have a unique brand. We have a unique opportunity here to not create the cookie cutter standard airport. And so we should be looking at that and saying, how do we know we're landing in Aspen? And how do we know? And then the other aspect is, how do we make our leaving experience the best one ever, so that when someone leaves Aspen, they're going, man, that was easy. I didn't have any trouble at the airport. It was easy to get in and out, and et cetera. So I do want to talk about that, you know, as part of our design goals, is to sort of address what makes us unique. So I think we need to look at other airports, but we also should be looking at our branding and saying, you know, what is Aspen? What do we want to convey to the visitor coming here?
Well, just from a guest service point of view, I just view everything as how does the passenger, how do those dropping them off and picking them up feel? And when you talk about other airports, one that I had been to maybe 2 or 3 years ago was Incheon in Seoul, Korea. And it's just amazing. It's extremely welcoming. It's so inside the terminal. It's focused on guest amenities, the children's play area. There's a business area, and these are questions and that we are asked. Where is there a computer? I need this. I need that. So, in addition to the actual structure of the building, I am just 150% into how do you feel when you walk into it, just to comment on what you said. How do you feel and what amenities do we have? One of the things that came up for the party that we had at the airport last Monday was could we get a massage, a chair massage, while we're waiting 4 hours for, you know, our getting into town. And I don't know how we could get photos, etc., of that Incheon airport, but you can get a manicure, there's a place to put a child to sleep for an hour if there's a delay. And I think of the delays weather-wise, and we're limited on space, but that we use the space to the best advantage to the traveling public.
I think one thing that I'd like to add about that whole transportation issue as part of this best practices study is, again, keeping in mind that one of the primary objectives is to reduce the need for private vehicles to be used in and out of town and at the airport at the same time, and all the implications that brings with it. And I think what we will hear probably from some of these airports some of it will be technology driven, but I think other things will be practices and policies as it relates to advertising, advanced marketing of alternatives that you might have available even today. So keep that in mind too, because I think those will be part of what we hear about best practices where airports have been successful in trying to minimize a single occupant vehicle.
An example of that would be having a digital information sign for when the next RAFTA bus is coming in the terminal.
Things like that.
Yes.
Well, you know, I was also thinking about what other groups might be a resource for this, and there was the Surface Transportation Policy Project, STPP, I think that's the name of it.
Right.
And I just don't know, do they have reference materials for airports or for other larger hubs? Do they have some of the case studies, success, failure stuff already? But, you know, it may be a little bit of a research or material research as much as places too.
Yeah, I don't remember if it's on Tim's slide or not, but one of the things we will be doing is a literature search. And we've already gone to TRIS, which is a Transportation Research Information System, where we can look and see what other work has been done on a research level about this very issue as well. And the STTP may be another candidate.
Okay, any other thoughts? Steve?
I was thinking about your comments about knowing when you have arrived in Aspen. And one of the airports I've flown through is St. Thomas, Virgin Islands. And when you land there, you know you are in the Virgin Islands. You walk off the plane, number one, you walk across the tarmac so you can feel the air and smell the ocean and see the hill there. And then you walk in the terminal and they have cruise on rum in little cups to hand to you. It's like putting the leis around your neck in Hawaii.
And a bunch of virgins?
And then you can walk right out the door and there's their little funky taxi system to take you around. The interface with the local transportation is right there, but you are immediately on island time and following their system, and you know you're there just immediately, and it's a really good feeling. So we need to do the same thing here. Saying to make them know that maybe not cruise on rum, but maybe whatever it takes to make them know there's best.
Big Creek vodka.
Hit them with a snowball.
Fred?
On that transportation issue, there seems to be a lot of hope that we'll rely on RAFTA for a big part of this. Takes them to a central part in Aspen. And I'm wondering about can we talk about the hotels and their bans to get that process maybe included in that, to where the outlying hotels are servicing their customers on a quicker, leg, including maybe getting in the bus line back and forth.
Another opportunity that you see down in Denver is where hotels share vans, so you don't need to have 70 vans going back and forth. Certainly in a small town, we should have the ability to work with the hotel industry to come up with a method to actually share vans and move traffic around just as quicker that way. Meg?
I had the pleasure for 10 years of flying in and out of Aspen for 100,000 miles every year. And pleasure or displeasure. And I am so hard put to think of an airport that I enjoyed in the United States. So I think our challenge is huge. I did enjoy Dallas-Fort Worth because it is circular and you get there and the cars are right there and your baggage is right there. So I don't know if that's possible here, but it's not spread out. So that would be one I would recommend.
Kansas City, Kansas is like that too.
Right.
You come right up and your gate is right there. It's not a huge TSA.
Oh, I have that on my list. It's the same kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay.
I would just add, I just think the public art at DIA is just phenomenal. There's public art everywhere at DIA, and it's indigenous, it's local, you even to the point of the architecture of the terminal, which I'm not suggesting that we go something like that, but, I just don't think we should forget that.
There was a really good article, I think in Sunday's paper, talking about Detroit. One way that they should be getting out of their debt was to sell some of their art from the Detroit Museum, but it went on in terms of how much money is being spent to purchase art, let's say in airports, versus having a share program with existing museums and just move it around. So DIA, instead of spending X amount of dollars for one or two pieces, could they have spent that much and gotten many more pieces just by sharing? And, with a new art museum here in town, there may be opportunities to have a moving museum.
Well, initially DIA, it was a mandated percentage of the construction budget. had to go to public art.
Tim, what, back on when you first started in terms of your project process, given the 6 meetings here, this is the first of 6. What sort of, I forget if you mentioned a time frame that you're looking at, and the design committees aware of the time frame and commitment that they have?
For completion?
Yes.
We're trying to get that 6th meeting in before the end of the year, so that the adoption process would occur in early next year.
That'd be great.
And we have a tentative schedule that we will be, that we've shared among the consultant team, and we will be working with the task force at the next meeting to sort of define their availability and so forth. So.
Okay. Anything we missed? Any last comments, suggestions? Rachel?
You know, one last potential resource, I'm not sure, but the National Association of County Governments, NACO, would have a list of the counties with county airports, and you might be able to do a survey through them of which ones even work on mass transit, and and then narrow it down from there.
All right, well, I want to thank the design committee for your commitment to this process and participating, sharing your thoughts and ideas with us. And Jim, and thank Tim and JD and Bob for coming up as well.
Thank you for a great start.
Thanks.
You're not affected by Okay, grassroots.
George, before we go,
Before we
just a note for everybody. Hold on for a second. The next meeting of the task force is October 8th. We have scheduled that meeting, so just so everybody knows that one.
October 8th. Okay, great. Grassroots, we're going to take a break. We'll be back here at 2:45. We got 5.
And the Grant Review Committee didn't really know what to do with public health because it's a mandatory service. So when we presented in November, we actually suggested trying it a different way this year. And the new way is that John Redmond and Connie Garofalo and I review the Community Health Services budget with their finance committee for the nonprofit. And then we decided to come in August in our third quarter meeting of the Board of Health for Liz to present the budget to get your conceptual approval so that the Grant Review Committee doesn't have to get confused about what their priorities are or what your priorities are. So that's what we're here for today. Liz is going to present her 2014 preliminary budget. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the concept of combining our boards of health, the City of Aspen and Pitkin County. And then I'll get out of the way and make room for Dr. Levin and Tom, and we'll go through anything else that we can get through in the hour.
So, Dan or Liz, the preliminary budget you're going to present to us, does that presume that we're going to, does that include joining these two departments together, the city and the county?
The boards of health?
Yes.
Yes, because there aren't any that we know of at this moment, any fiscal impacts to doing that. There's no sign that the city would stop funding community health. So we're just assuming that things will go along as they have been with the same funding. So
Okay.
does that?
Yeah, thanks.
So I'll turn it over to Liz. And so in your packet, I provided for you, you have a paper copy of my PowerPoint. And let me find the page, which is attachment C. My memo is attachment A, which really gives you some of the activity, other topics other than the budget that if we have time, we can answer questions about that or discuss those. And attachment D is the draft 2014 budget with a 2-year comparison to 2013. So that's what you have in your packet, and I have a PowerPoint. So this is what Nan just said, that we prepared our budget a little earlier this year due to the circumstances that Nan outlined. And we met with county staff. And so my board, the CHS board, has not reviewed the budget yet. And so the sequence of events will be that, as Nan said, we'll get your conceptual approval of the budget, and I'll take it to our board of directors. This is August, maybe September, or after we maybe hear from the Healthy Community Fund, Citizen Grant Review Committee, and we'll approve that in the fall. So that's sort of been our process this year. So I just wanted to give you some trends that we're seeing so far in 2013 compared to 2012. And this is what we've seen as a result of our mid-year financials, our 6-month financials, which you don't have a copy of, but I just wanted to highlight some of the major trends. You recall our biggest project of the year was building a revenue cycle management system for billing insurance for both our immunization services and family planning services. So during the first part of 2013, what we saw, we were getting a lot of our contracts in place. We didn't have most of them in place during the first part of the year. So in terms of screening people, we were advising clients that it might be in their best interest to seek some of those services elsewhere, because we were not in a position, if they had insurance, that was, because we were not in a position to actually bill their insurance on their behalf. So we probably turned away clients. So we saw some of our numbers in both our immunization program and family planning services decline for the first part of 2012, which was sort of an unintended consequence of that. Our hope is that now that we have our contracts in place, we'll see that increase over the next 6 months, which was what we expected. We expected to see a lot of increased revenue from insurance in all of 2013, so we're hoping we see that in the last 6 months. But what was interesting was that even with the decrease in numbers of people seen in both of those programs, we saw an increase in the amount of fees that we've collected compared to 2012. So that tells us that even a little bit of insurance billing that we were doing for immunization services made a difference in our immunization program. And we do know that we've been much better about collecting family planning fees. We have a strong donation program in that, donation system, a request in that program. So we're just doing better in asking for fees in the family planning program. So I thought that was an interesting finding, that even with the decreased numbers, we were already over what we saw in 2012. Now, we're not nearly what we wanted to be in 2013 because we budgeted high, being optimistic about insurance income. But as I said, hopefully we'll meet that by the end of the year. The numbers in our prenatal program continue to decline. Remember when we took on Eagle County several years ago, we saw a big boom in that program, and it quadrupled our program. And ever since then, we've just seen a sort of a steady decline in the numbers of women that we're seeing in that program. And we speculated over the years as to why that is. That population of low-income women moving away from the community. We'd like to think that our family planning contraceptive program might be making a difference. But nonetheless, we have continued to see a decrease in 2013 compared to mid-year of 2012. So that's just goes along with the trend, and that does affect the financials there. The income for those programs matches the decrease in the number of women seen. So those are sort of the major trends that we've seen. The overall trends for our 2014 budget, we just have a overall 2% increase in our budget compared to 2013. Most of that is in our total wages and benefits. We
have a 5% increase in wages, and that includes a 3% market adjustment for staff. And then there was one part-time employee salary that I thought I was going to eliminate in 2013, but didn't. So that salary is included in this budget. So that's where that increase in total wages comes from. And of course, like everybody else, we are anticipating an increase in our insurance costs. And we do have some employees who have expressed interest in being added to the plan next year. So between the expected premium expenses and adding employees, we do see a 10% increase in our insurance costs, overall payroll costs. I've shown you this graph before. It's getting a little busy, but it's a 5-year comparison of our budget, percent of budget of the different income categories. So if you really just want to focus on the last two columns, the green and the brown one, that shows you the budgets for 2013 and 2014. Client fees, we're expected to stay the same, but what we're seeing there is sort of a different composition of, and if you look at the budget numbers and attachment D, there's just sort of a shift in where we think we're gonna collect some increased and decreased fees. For example, we hope to increase our family planning fees, but we do believe that our prenatal fees will decline in 2014. So that sort of evens us out in that category in the 2 years.
So are you guys all there on attachment D? It's the very first paragraph of income that Liz is talking about. Just want to make sure.
Thank you.
It always takes me a while to find
it. Yeah, sorry about that. So yeah, under income, where it says total client fees, we're just sort of even between the 2 years, but inside that category, there's some shifts. Our local contracts include, we have a Komen Foundation grant, Aspen Valley Foundation grant, and we're seeing some shifts there. Projected that our Komen grant did go down this year, and we kind of expect at least the same amount or even less next year. And we did have a reduction. We had a new grant in 2013, that Eagle County Tobacco Fund. You see that for $48,000, and that grant did go down in 2014. So again, there's just some shifts in there, and we're expecting an overall decline in our local contracts. And I have singled out Pitkin County just so you can see the percent of our budget that Pitkin County contributes. And that's remained fairly steady. Our state contracts are a little up and down, but the state has really come through in supporting us with a lot of this transition. So overall, their grants are fairly stable, but they do kind of come through with some one-time grants to help us with the transition. For example, the immunization program awarded us a grant to help us really analyze the sustainability of all this insurance billing. So we are developing systems to calculate what our expenses and incomes are related to purchasing private children's vaccine, and then what our insurance income will be. So that was a special grant from the state in addition to our regular immunization grant. Do you have any questions about that?
I have just a question back to local contracts. Why are we seeing, for example, the Komen Foundation going down and Eagle County Tobacco Funds going down? Those are sort of the two biggest.
The Komen Foundation, I think it's just a state of the economy that I think they have struggled over the last several years.
Is that coming from the national?
It's coming from the local chapter of the Susan G. Komen Foundation, yes. And so all their fundraising efforts just haven't been what they were in the past.
Well, and there was that misstep of the national saying they were no longer going to support Planned Parenthood, and that has affected things as well.
Yeah,
even though our local chapter wasn't involved in that.
Right, I think it did impact them sort of on a political level overall. So.
And the Eagle County Tobacco Funds?
And that is just a function of, that's a regional grant that we partner with Eagle and Garfield, thank you, on, and that was just a reduction in the work, in the scope of work that was required of that tobacco work. So it was directly tied to that.
Okay, any other questions on the budget so far? Okay.
I wanted to just also point out in our state contracts, right under local contracts, that you'll notice there the state immunization grant is bumped up quite a bit, and that's related to the grant that I just mentioned to help us with our sustainability analysis. The community nursing grant, that increase is our public health planner, Jordana Sabella, works like a quarter of her time, not even a quarter, as sort of the state liaison, still sort of helping other counties coordinate their public health improvement plans. So we are funded from the state to help her do that work. So that accounts for that increase in that grant. And then our Women's Wellness Connection, which is the breast and cervical cancer screening program for women aged 40 to 64, has continued to grow year after year. And so we still do project growth in that program. And so that's where defines the increase in that grant for 2014. So here's what we're thinking is going to happen next year, and we sort of built our budget around that we're going to increase our income from insurance billing. As I said, we now have 5 insurance contracts in place that we've gotten since the first of the year, and we're currently billing, and we're being reimbursed satisfactorily, we think, but as I said, we're monitoring that. We expect to see a decrease in our local foundation grants and some relative stability in our Colorado contracts, and with some unknown, so always unexpected one-time capacity building grants that they give us.
Yes.
It's really good news about the progress with the insurance billing and have 5 contracts in place. And I'm just kind of wondering, how does this mesh now with the insurance exchange, and how many different providers are out there that people may get insurance from that we may need to have contracts with? Do we know that interface yet?
We, as a provider, we're beginning to get information from some of the contracted insurance companies that they will have a plan on the exchange. And I recently did go to a workshop where someone from the Connect for Health Colorado, which is the exchange, was there, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the number. They do know how many insurance companies plan to participate in the exchange, and it's a good. I don't even want to say, because I can't. I want to say 20.
I think it was around 15 or something.
Yeah. But it's a good number. I think they felt like Colorado had more than many other states. So not every insurance will have a plan in the exchange, but we have some of those contracted insurance companies that will participate in that. Now, in terms of providers, that will be medical providers that will be contracted.
Yeah, no, I wasn't going to get in there, but I guess that's going to be something that's going to be a bit of a challenge going forward in 2014, is to then get contracts in place with other providers.
Right. Exactly.
And it struck me, I think it's more something that's going to be through NAM's office than yours per se, but there certainly could be a lot of opportunities for cross-pollination of letting people know with posters or signs how to get signed up on the exchange.
Yeah, you may hear more about that later on today.
Yep.
But I think it's, I think it's a huge role for public health to help educate the public about the insurance exchanges and how to access that system and get enrolled in a plan. So I see us, we're already sort of a partner in the local grant that the region received to do that work, that you'll hear about later. But I think as a public health agency, we have a big role in just because we are serving the population that really is going to benefit from the exchange. So that's their target population. So we really need to be part of that education process.
We're stuck together.
Is that something Pat Bingham can help you develop some flyers that you can?
Potentially, there's a lot going on through the Northwest COG, which is our hub. And hopefully Kathy will be able to tell us more just, about that. But we'll be certainly on that. We have, as you guys probably know, the greatest number in the state of people who could qualify for Medicaid but are not on it. And so we have a lot of work to, and we have the highest rate of uninsured in the state. So we're going to have a lot of work to do, and we're working together with Public Health and Eagle County, and we'll be able to tell you more, I hope, later.
With the kind of services that we provide as the direct services that community health services provide, we really have a great niche and a great opportunity to be a provider in this community. Family planning or Title X services are pretty unique, and we offer things that a lot of local primary care providers don't have access to. For example, low-cost birth control. We have birth control in our office that we can sell to women based on their income, and it would be put on a sliding fee scale if they're uninsured. And that's not true. I mean, any other physician office, you have to be handed a prescription and go to a pharmacy, and if you're uninsured, that really doesn't work for you. So we have that ability. We have, that's all we do. So we sort of specialize in women's health in that regard. So we really bring a lot to the table in terms of women's health. So that was part of our motivation to get in the insurance game, because we wanted to be a provider for women, whether they're insured or uninsured, because of the nature of the specialty services that we offer. And the same is true for immunizations. I have a nurse that does that all day long, and she knows those immunizations inside out, and so that sort of creates a niche for us. And I think there's room for, there's going to be a lot more insured people, and so we'll still be able to provide services to the people that have been coming to us historically, like to come to us. But we also want to promote a medical home. We want people to get their primary care, and so I think another part of our mission is going to be to really partner with primary care over the next few years as all this unrolls, so that we're a real partner in making sure that people we have some continuity of care.
Sounds great.
So our goals for 2014, which are directly tied to our budget, are, we, as the public health agency, we need to be still prepared to respond to community needs. If hopefully not, there's not a pandemic, but that's what our primary reason for being. We really are striving to maintain our existing programs, just for the reasons I just explained. We want to really monitor the sustainability of this insurance billing practice. We need to continue to build capacity for that. We've purchased a practice management system, and we'll be implementing that soon, which will hopefully, electronic things are not necessarily make life easier, but we hope it does streamline and enhance our ability to do that billing. And we also know that we need to build some additional capacity to really do more public health planning and all the work that's related to our public health improvement plan. So we need to continue to look at those core public health services and continue to build our capacity to do that work. And that's it. Any questions?
Good presentation.
So related to the budget, if you have, I'm willing to, this is a draft. So if there are any concerns overall about how we're, there's not a lot of change in the overall dollar amount. We're not asking for additional funds from the Healthy Community Fund this year. We appreciate the generous funding that we're currently receiving, and we feel like that will sustain us, keep us going, and level in 2014.
Okay. Looks like we're good to go to the next step.
Okay, yeah, I think as long as there are no concerns, we'll take it forward. And why don't we talk about joining our boards of health? So, let's see. I have some background in the memo, and just a reminder that the Public Health Act of 2008 required each county and or municipality to establish a board of health, a public health agency, and a public health director. In Pickens County, established Pickens County as the public health agency. It established Liz Stark as the public health director, and you all by resolution, established yourselves as the Board of Health. And the Board of Health's job is to oversee the priorities of public health work and to ensure that they have the monies available to meet the needs that you all set as priorities. At the same time that Pickens County established itself as a Board of Health, the City of Aspen chose to accept the opportunity that municipalities were given to create their own public health agency, Board of Health, and Public Health Director. Only 2 municipalities in the state did this, Aspen and the City of Denver. And Aspen had their reasons for it. It was primarily, I believe, around their passion with the Canary Initiative and the environment. They didn't want to lose that, and there was some uncertainty about where the act was going and what was going to be required. So they established, as you see here, Lee Casson was the public health director, and since her retirement, C.J. Oliver is the public health director. The board, the city council is the Board of Health, and their public health agency, I believe, is the city council. I'm not entirely sure about that. So we all move forward with this structure, and as you guys can see on attachment B is one of our best drawings of the chaos that we created with this act. And I don't even know if it makes sense to explain this, but it starts with the State Department of Health, Board of Health, the State Department of Public Health Environment, and then you have Pickens County's Board of Health, the City of Aspen's Board of Health, and then you have our local medical officer in the middle there. And because we are unique in that we contract public health out to a private nonprofit, you might remember that only 3 counties in the state do this: Moffett, Routt, and Pitkin. So we're even further complicated in that we don't have a county department providing public health. We contract that to a separate agency. They have, so you have the public health agency, which is Pickens County, with Liz Stark as the director. Then you have the agency, and they have their own board of directors, which is at the bottom there. And somewhere in there, environmental health fits in. We have a Pickens County environmental health. We have City of Aspen environmental health. And this chart was our first opportunity at kind of looking at where the energy flows, and there's arrows going in both directions. It's hard to see on the black and white copy, but there are different color arrows for dollars and support and direction.
If I could just jump in, and we sat down with this and asked ourselves, first, what if we had a public health emergency, between the entities? How effective is this structure going to be for decision making and coordinating action? And we thought probably not terribly effective, given that we had difficulty understanding just how the arrows flowed and decision making flowed and what have you. There are other reasons to be considering it, but that was, at least for me, that brought into very sharp relief why we're having this discussion now.
Right.
But you didn't do a flow chart with the proposed new structure.
We haven't yet.
Yeah.
So we wanted to bring the idea to you all today to get your ideas about it before we go to a joint meeting, which is set for the 17th of September. As you know, the county staff, community health services staff, and city staff are all unanimously in agreement that one way to simplify, to start, is to have one Board of Health. The city is potentially willing to dissolve their Board of Health, their public health agency, and their public health director, and just go with one that would be defined as a county public health, Board of Health, public health agency, and Liz as the director. We have had 2 meetings exploring the strengths and challenges of this. Most of us can only think of the strengths of doing this. Potentially there's a risk for the city of Aspen losing some local control, but at this point, I think that there's enough mandates with this act, and it's clear that the county has taken on the majority of the obligation for the act, that they're willing to actually simplify and create a more efficient governance opportunity. And the options, it looks like if we do this, that we were looking for feedback from you all on, is would we want to go with the Board of County Commissioners being the Board of Health, or possibly the Board of County Commissioners expanded with a couple of other members, to maybe take some members from the city or to look for some subject matter experts. So I think there are two questions. One is, what do you think about the idea of combining the boards of health? And the second is, how would you see the formation of the Board of Health? We talked a little bit about whether or not we would create a totally separate Board of Health, which about 16 counties or districts have done in the state, where it's not county commissioners, it's subject matter experts and from all over the county, and they sit on a Board of Health. And that is an option that's available to us. At this point, we feel that with our current structure and already contracting to Community Health Services, and they're having a board of directors, that a totally new Board of Health with new members just adds one more layer in the emergency structure that John is talking about. So the opportunity for the county commissioners to remain the Board of Health is really a simple step for us in an emergency, or when you all need to approve the budget or the priorities. You're sort of the same entity, and we don't have to go through multiple bureaucratic steps to do that. So, questions?
Michael?
Well, you've got this one diagram
Craziness.
of the two organizations, but you don't have a resulting diagram if we were to have one Board of Health. And so it doesn't show me what any advantages are. I mean, it doesn't even show me that there's some sort of simplified line of responsibility. So I'm not sure that I can fully appreciate what you're suggesting.
Okay, so I could do that.
Yeah, that was my earlier question. I mean, in concept, I like the idea, especially if the city is supportive of it, because they're the ones that are actually sort of giving up that aspect in terms of what they're doing. On the Community Health Board of Directors, have you thought about then including someone from the city on that? Is there someone currently sitting on that board that is from the city, representing the city?
Our board has recruited members like a nonprofit does, in terms of looking for certain expertise, whether it be financial expertise, community relations, or marketing expertise. We could definitely explore that, but we have not explored that yet. But it's something that we could consider. I think that with the city, and I think it's with C.J. Oliver at the helm now, I think it became really clear to him about the inefficiency of continuing to be designated as a local public health agency and him being a public health director. So I think that has created a great opportunity to say we only have one Board of Health, but to also to include, to continue to recognize the role that the city plays in public health and the decisions that need to be made for the community. So potentially including a city representative on the Board of Health, or a medical public health subject matter expert to help. Just to help bring some of that expertise to the Board of Health, as the Board of Health is responsible for identifying and supporting public health priorities. So those were sort of some of the ideas and sort of the impetus. It just seems like a great opportunity to explore other possibilities for the Board of Health.
So I'll get you in a sec, John, but the city's Board of Health, was that an outgrowth, and Tom can probably answer this, from the environmental board, the department that you ran and then Lee took over?
Not necessarily. Initially, well before this, the current structure, the way it exists, all municipalities were boards of health and county commissioners were boards of health, just by default under the old statute. So when the new public health law was passed, that restructured, as Nan and Liz are explaining it, in a much more precise way, and tried to unify the state, county by county, to provide public health and environmental public health services under a cleaner system. So we always operated, when I was the head of the Joint City County Department, you were the Board of Health when I did county work, and the city was the Board of Health when I did city work. So it's just historically the way it was.
John?
Well, and I just wanted to bring it back to, because Michael, you're right, we don't have the alternative kind of organization chart. And what we're hoping to do today, I think, is define what we see as the problem, and we have some alternatives to kind of talk about so that we can draw that chart out, or we can better line out what that structure would look like, so that when we come back, our intent is to talk about this when we have our joint meeting with the City Council. We wanted to get some guidance from you all about what your preferences might be, so that we can start to draw those lines and draw that chart, because it is complicated and there are a lot of questions. I think right now the key questions are, one, do you agree that this does not look like the right kind of governance model, and that we should probably be looking for some level of simplification and combining that decision-making role? With the next question then being, if the answer to that is, if it's no, then we just stay where we're at. If the answer to that is yes, then we go to the next question, which is, okay, what should that structure be? It could be a separate Board of Health, which we're not recommending, but that's an alternative. It could be you all sitting as the Board of Health, or it could be you guys plus some additional members to either bring, either expertise in public health to the table in your decision-making process, or if the concern is about the political, having a broad cross-representation from different entities, then you'd want to maybe invite council members or something like that. So to just get some ideas what your preference would be, so we could draw up that recommended chart, because we still are working through that ourselves. But it seems to me there's some key questions here. Does this look too complicated, and should we simplify? If so, that simplification has to start at the board level. Then do you have any thoughts about what you'd like that board to look like? I think our recommendation is that it be you at the center, with either additions or not. You could also look at creating that third layer, although I think that may make us more complicated than we already are, at least no less complicated than we already are. So if we could work through some of those questions, if you think you have enough information, that'd be helpful.
All right, thanks. Michael?
Well, I think, along with it, just organizational charts and what looks simpler and what looks more direct, is you have to say, how does this serve the challenges that as a community we meet? So in the case of a pandemic, which seems to be the most challenging situation we're in, how would that structure meet that challenge? And what would be the steps in meeting that challenge? Mm-hmm. And indeed, does that simple diagram meet that challenge? You wouldn't know. I mean, I don't want to base it on simple diagrams, complicated diagrams, or simple diagrams. I want to base it on meeting the challenges that the overall community, including Aspen, Pickens County, have to meet. And whether it's women's health care, I just don't know. So I think you have to outline that chart and how it meets the various community challenges. And is that direct, and is that the best way to do it? I wouldn't know.
Rachel?
Yeah, to the first question, yes, I think it looks too complicated, so I can weigh in there. And just by way of background, you know, I recall when the state passed the law, and we actually had discussions in this room with Lee Casson at the time, and, you know, she was fairly clear that, hey, we have a long history of being a Board of Health, not like we're just suddenly becoming one, and that we might have unique concerns. And it didn't seem to make a lot of sense to have two different boards of health in the small community at that time. So, you know, frankly, I'm glad to see the progress of this, and it's just, you know, kind of played out over time, and let it continue to consolidate. Makes sense to me. But to Michael's point, I agree. I'd love to see, you know, perhaps some narratives about how the Board of Health would be able to respond to the various concerns that now include an area which, you know, we kind of included and we didn't include, because, you know, city residents are both city and county residents, of course. And the experience that I kind of remember, two things coming up the most is the Board of Health, and they were in the city, and they were, you know, testing magpies we found with for West Nile that were on city roads or near city recreation facilities and things like that, concerns for kids out playing on the parks with West Nile. And then when there was asbestos found in the red brick, or the yellow brick, after there was some construction work down there, and then concerns that the asbestos had been tracked into the building, and, you know, we joined as a Board of Health and responded to that as an emergency, because the very next morning kids were supposed to be in school, and how to notify the parents that we were closing the school and cleaning it up and re-cleaning it until, you know, it tested just a 0 factor. So part of that narrative to me is like, how do we respond should there be those type of fairly acute and isolated health issues that you wouldn't expect, like asbestos in a building, a child care center. And so that's a little of what I would want to make sure we're able to be as responsive as perhaps would be necessary, versus what usually is kind of our quarterly meeting and usual business and usual budget and work and health updates. And so that's where I want to kind of see is how nimble would and could we be if it's a fast occurring type of thing. And I guess my final point would be I would like to see us, and it was suggested at that discussion, you know, in 07, 08, whenever it was, that we consider expanding the Board of Health to have 1 or 2 city reps, or maybe, you know, I think if we want to keep it an odd number, not that we've ever had close votes on this matter, but, you know, maybe one could be Snowmass, one could be Aspen. But I think it's not the political as much as the keeping in touch and the lines of communication. I think it'd be really good for council members of both boards to be more in touch with what are the healthcare needs of their workforce and their community and how they're being responded to. And I just think it's a good connection. It's less political power or anything like that, but I just think it's more of the keeping of a regional approach, and to keep our regional partners within the county involved, so that, you know, they're not feeling disconnected about it, and then, oh, the county takes care of that, and oh, it's the county's problem, and the county didn't do it the way we would have wanted to. Whereas if you have someone involved on the board, that connection is made. And so I just think that would be my preference.
So we've got 2 municipalities. So what does Snowmass do? Do they just fall under they fall under us already? So they're already, so it's just.
And they contribute to the budget.
They contribute to the budget. So
In most other counties, all municipalities fall in the county Board of Health.
Yeah.
It's just different for us.
Yeah, I would agree with Rachel, at least initially, that it would make sense to have a rep from Snowmass and from the City of Aspen, just so they're informed, like we are informed, and engaged. It was similar to the conversation we had recently with the Health and Community Fund, you know, trying to encourage the city to become involved in that process so they better understand that. Because we get all this information, and of course the city doesn't, and probably the town of Snowmass doesn't either. Steve?
I also like that idea of having representatives from the 2 governments in getting subject matter advice on things, there's two ways we could get it. We could get it from a member of the Board of Health. We could get it from Dr. Levin or from other people also who don't have to be on the board. So I think we could rely on Dr. Levin's advice on a lot of, to get sort of the medical opinion on something that we maybe don't quite understand. But I think it'd be worth talking to the city of Aspen when we have the joint meeting about that, and putting out the proposal, having one of the city council people be on the Board of Health, just as, we kind of have to see how they react. They might be kind of territorial about it, or hopefully they could see the benefit of simplifying the whole thing. In the event of some kind of a medical emergency, the more simple we can make the flow chart, the better. This kind of looks like the housing authority more to me. And we want to avoid that kind of, we have a pandemic going on here, and it'll take us 2 months to get through all of the back and forth between the boards. We don't want that to happen.
Rob?
I agree with most of what's been said. It does seem like it could be simplified, but I also agree with Michael. It'd be nice to see, what that means in terms of providing the services in the event, like Rachel said, of the worst case scenario, because it's not just, as Rachel said, business as usual, where we meet, we get updates, and hopefully we continue providing the study services of things. But I would also like the question that George asked at the very beginning of this meeting answered a little better, which is how does this affect our budget? And again, not just in a normal circumstance, but in a circumstance where there is a worst case scenario, and what sort of contributions is Aspen's budget going to be part of this, or is it something that they're going to want to be completely out of? And we've sort of seen their stuff with the Healthy Community Fund and those issues. But
So it sounds like conceptually we're ready to move forward with more information. I just wonder if we should have another work session before our joint session. It's always better, I think, when we go into those joint sessions, that if we actually have a consensus versus trying to struggle at that time. I don't know if there's time to do that.
We can certainly look at that. I think you guys are probably going to be a little bit ahead. I'm not sure what the schedule is to brief the city council at this point. Have you guys heard anything from CJ?
No.
Okay.
I think his intention is at least to get to Steve Barwick, and that may be...
He was having trouble getting in on their agenda, but I think a couple of things. We could come back and we can bring a new chart, and we definitely would bring one on the 17th. But we're not meeting with the city reps until the 12th of September, now the 13th, because that was the soonest we could get together to prepare for that meeting. So I'm just worried about having another meeting without having conversations with them.
I think if we do that, we'd have to have it with the understanding that, there's two partners, obviously, in this, and there may be some moving pieces, so that while we may have more time to build consensus and bring some additional information to the table, that could change again by the time we get to September 17th, depending on what kind of discussions the city has. And we may or may not be able to line out the financial information, because there's really two different discussions going on. One, how are decisions made, and then how are the financial decisions made. But we can certainly try and flesh out to the greatest degree possible what the intentions are, but of both parties related to that.
I just note that on September 10th, we do have a prep meeting for our city meeting. And there is a half an hour time slot right now open after that, so maybe we move an extra 15 minutes into that
we
meeting.
can plan on September 10th, and we'll talk with Steve, and we'll talk with CJ. We'll try to design a singular model or two, whatever it looks like, to show the simplification of communication and the simplification of duties, given a couple of scenarios, how it might work.
Okay, Rachel?
Yeah, I guess three things. One is on the chart, I think, and I'm sure you're planning on it at some level, but really, what is that input from the two different environmental health directors? How does that affect, at what level, with community health or with our Board of Health? And I'll come back to that in a minute, but that's one thing. I think it'd be really valuable, whether it's attachment to the chart or whatever, but to really outline what are the responsibilities of a Board of Health in this packet, because that's, I think, at least what at some levels gives pause to the city of whether they really want to try to continue to maintain this function going forward or not, and it'll help the dialogue go forward. To your point, I think it'd be very difficult to broach the financials right now, because depending on the nature of your crisis, there could be federal grants, there could be state assistance, there could be FEMA, there could be insurance policies paying off because it was a chemical spill that someone, so it's really hard to try to get what is someone's financial commitment for this whole array of things we may or may not know of. I mean, and at this point, their only financial commitment is the annual budget contribution to the ongoing services, as opposed to, you know, any sort of new efforts that have to be raised. So that I don't know. I think it might lead off track of what we're really working towards. And just to kind of come back to it in terms of these responsibilities, because this has struck me, you know, we've recently got some emails to request that would we, as our board, comment on the Air Quality Control Commission's potential new regulations on oil and gas emissions. And so normally we kick that right up to Ellen Sassano, long-range senior planner. She helps us make our comments, but it struck me, isn't this maybe something we should be weighing in as a letter from the Board of Health as well? You know, yes, no, or do we use you as a referral agency on those things? Yes, no. And I'm not as clear, and so I think that would be good to, you know, again, kind of talk about what those roles are, so that we don't confuse what we want our individual environmental health directors and our senior planners doing, and not pushing more onto your plate when you're more direct services and preparing for, you know, more less environmental disease, but or contamination, and that is something I think where the city originally was maintaining their control, both Canary Initiative, but also environmental quality in the community, and so that would be great to try to clarify those types of things.
All right, so you have enough direction?
Yeah, thank you. Very good.
So do we have...
Go to my seat and let
Dr. Levin, do you have any updates, information you'd like to share with us?
Actually, I just wanted to add that was a really interesting discussion, and just one extra point about this chart, which we're attempting to simplify, and what Steve and John were talking about. What do we do in case of an emergency? If there's a true kind of public health, infectious disease, otherwise type of emergency, what are we going to look to? You know, how is this chart going to guide us? And my thoughts were, as I was sitting there, I think, not to make things complicated, but there probably needs to be a different type of a flow sheet in terms of, you know, this, simplifying this will definitely help elucidate what do you do in the day of something happens, and to have a really good emergency preparedness plan. But I think it might, and I don't know if we have anything like this or if it's been constructed in the past, some type of a flow sheet of who talks to who, how do we educate the public, how do we, you know, do we have an emergency Board of Health meeting? Is that something that we're all prepared to do when something happens? And where are the conversations going to take place? And how do we get the word out? Basically, a plan of how do we educate the public, newspapers, or whatever the plan is. So that might be another thing to consider, and not kind of look at this as...
It just made me think of something, if I could just add one thing. Thank you. Rachel was talking about it, and our sense is this is just the beginning of actually trying to strengthen our public health response and commitments and understanding. And we're thinking that if once we sort of got the Board of Health aligned, then we could work on our roles and responsibilities with community health services, environmental health, emergency planning, and so this is just the first step.
Just the first step.
I meant to say
I didn't mean to jump in.
This is a great club.
I didn't mean to jump in so quickly. I was just kind of looking at them as a little bit separate. So,
that's absolutely correct.
So, yeah, I just could talk about a couple of public health issues that are going on in the state right now. And one of them, which is the season, is West Nile. And interestingly enough, I was reading about the pools of mosquitoes that have been looked at this year is up compared to last year. So 17.4% of mosquitoes that have been pooled across the state are positive for West Nile versus 8.9% from last year. So the numbers are higher, and we're not through it yet. It can come up to Pitkin County. It hasn't yet. There was a case in Eagle, and across Colorado there's been 72 cases. Most of them, I did print out a chart here, but it may be a little hard for you to see. Most of the cases are in kind of north in Weld, Larimer, Adams, Boulder. And there's a couple of cases. There's 6 in Delta and 1 in Mesa County. The mosquitoes have been positive in Garfield, but not in Pitkin. And then positive in Eagle. There's been 1 case in Eagle. So there's been, of the 72 cases, been 1 death in the state, and that was in Weld. So it's something to know about. There's no vaccine for West Nile virus. It's on the rise, and it's really only personal protection that we can do to decrease it. So, and treatment, of course, is supportive care. There's no definite treatment. There's no lack of medication or anything. That's the issue here. So I thought that was interesting. And then the other kind of interesting case is Salmonella, which there's been kind of a multi-state outbreak of Salmonella. And Colorado is the highest state. As of 316 cases nationwide, we have 37 of them. And I think there's been 3 in Pitkin.
There have been 2 that I know of, and they are not related to this outbreak, but I did check that.
Oh, okay.
But they weren't related to this, but we have had a couple.
And kind of the interesting thing that they're thinking that it might be linked to is backyard flocks, that there's kind of an increase in allowing backyard chickens and people raising their own chickens, and there's actually been some schools that have started talking about this. So, there may be an issue in terms of increasing awareness of how to prevent it, and if this actually becomes more and more of a trend. And of course that is treatable, and there's more emerging resistance to some of the antibiotics, but at this point it's treatable, and there have been no deaths from that. And then there's been several other nationwide outbreaks that have not affected Colorado, and one of them is the H3N2 variant of the flu, of influenza, which is mostly in Indiana. It's linked to pigs, and there haven't been any cases in Colorado yet, which has been great. And it's definitely a virulent one, so hopefully it won't come here.
So schools have started. So does that correlate to sort of an increase in some sort of epidemics or illnesses?
Well, I mean, mostly just viruses, which are so easily spread in schools and daycare centers. And of course, there's been pertussis, but that is not, that's something that we'll be looking out for as well. And I think there's been an increased awareness in terms of vaccinating against pertussis.
Any other questions?
I'm sorry if I could, you were right, Dr. Levin, there have been 3 cases of salmonella that we've investigated so far in this year, and part of my memo to you was just about what appears to us to be an increased number of foodborne illnesses that we've investigated so far this year. So just to remind the public the ways that they can protect themselves, which I've listed in your memo, to cook your poultry and your meats thoroughly, wash raw vegetables thoroughly before eating them, avoid consuming unpasteurized milk and dairy products, wash your hands thoroughly before eating and preparing food, and after going to the toilet. After changing diapers, wash your hands and the child's hands. Infected persons should not prepare food for other people. Keep all your foods, like your vegetables, separate from meat products. Don't let them intermingle on cooking boards, cutting boards and things. avoid sexual practices that can transmit fecal-oral transmission, avoid drinking untreated and unfiltered water, and avoid unboiled water when traveling in developing countries. So most of the cases that we've investigated so far this year have, it's sometimes really hard to pinpoint the source of the infection, but sometimes it's pretty clear, I drank from the stream, I drank from a water hose on the golf course, just be aware of those kinds of things, because we have them here in Pitkin County, and investigating them.
We've got just about 3 minutes left. I want to get a quick update from Tom, but are there any specific questions for Dr. Levin?
Well, just in the report, as it mentioned, the 2 suspected tuberculosis cases, were they actual cases, or what was the status on that?
One we're still working on, and the other one was ruled out.
Okay, thank you.
Steve, did you have a hand up?
I was wondering about if the H3N2 flu variety will be included in this year's flu vaccine, or do you know that?
I don't know that specifically that answer, but I think it's hopefully they'll be looking at it now.
Okay, because if it's in Indiana, everything comes through Aspen during the winter time, so
right.
we'll probably be getting some of that around here, I would think.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Last but not least, Tom Dunlap. Tom, if you just give us a quick, brief update.
Yep. Actually, there's a terrific segue. Dr. Levin was just mentioning about the multi-state outbreak on salmonella. One of the issues I'm working with, I'm representing the National Environmental Health Association on the Food Safety Modernization Act Committee at CDC, and we are currently looking at the trend in the United States now that is causing getting away from culture-based identification of organisms that can relate different areas and jurisdictions to a single source. And if it continues the way it is, my summary in my memo was that that it can probably take us back into the 1950s as far as being able to identify multi-state outbreaks. So there's an issue with that going on, which I'm working nationally on as well. The other thing was on foodborne illness outbreaks. From June 13th, 2013 to August 6th, there have been 31 federal recalls of food items due to contamination. These were fish, cantaloupe, candy, shrimp, salsa, cheese, cider, hummus, pistachios, and spices. That's within the past few months. There's been 31 Class 1 federal recalls going on. So foodborne illness is certainly an issue. The other thing I wanted to mention was the work I'm doing with the National Association of County and City Health Officials. I provided you with some information, and I've got more detail if anyone was interested in going into the substance of it. But what we're working on at that national nonprofit is a sequester update. We're in supporting the Prevention and Public Health Fund deadline for extending the menu labeling letter to the White House. In other words, creating a nutritional labeling requirement, a webinar on land use, zoning, and the public's health, an analysis of issues with the controversial Farm Bill. Food stamps is obviously a huge part of the Farm Bill, and that seems to be really a huge stumbling block in getting it passed intact. A discussion of the impact of cuts on healthy homes and childhood lead poisoning prevention, and the Institute of Medicine report evaluating obesity prevention efforts and implementation of the Health Reform Act. So my engagement with NACHO's various committees we're continuing to deal with all of these. And then lastly, I'm working with the National Network of Public Health Institutes, meeting with the CEO and president of that in Breckenridge on September 19th for a lunch at the Public Health Summit in Colorado. And my thought is that there are a lot of very large institutes and foundations in the United States, and I represent the Colorado Foundation for Public Health and Environment in this larger group, to look at possible funding for environmental health programs through some of these nonprofits who have hundreds of millions of dollars. And this is just kind of an initial kind of toe in the water to see if there's any opportunities. We meet in New Orleans every May to talk about this environmental health, starting to get a little more of a presence there. the new CEO and president of the National Network of Public Health Institutes is a personal friend, and I worked with him in the environmental health programs at the National Association of County and City Health Officials. So we're continuing to look at that as possible funding sources for shortfalls at local environmental health departments, not just ours, but other health departments as well.
Oh, great, thank you. Any questions for Tom? Okay, thank you all.
Appreciate it.
Well, I'll need a motion to adjourn as the Board of Health.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And we'll just sort of switch hats. I'll keep the special meeting intact. I'll accept the motion, go in as Board of Social Services.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, from the Board of Health to Board of Social Services.
Thanks again.
Want to come up, and then we'll just have people come up as we can.
Nancy's still here.
Oh, I'm always here. Well, I mean, I'm always here when you're the Board of Health and the Board of Social Services.
In spirit.
In spirit, I'm always here. Yeah. Okay, so did we just convened as a Board of Social Services? Okay,
did.
thank you. So I'm here with Connie Garofalo, our accountant for Human Services. And as you all may remember, as a Board of Social Services, you have two jobs that you have to do on a regular basis. One is you have to approve the expenditures, and the second is that you need to approve the payrolls. And the payrolls, is a reminder, is the money that goes to our clients as assistance. And so this is sort of a checks and balances, where we will present to you our expenditures, our payrolls, and then we'll give you other updates. And the only action you need to take is around the expenditures and the payrolls. And I just need to ask John, because I forget how to do this.
Yeah, you just
Hit on?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, Michael.
Okay.
Now,
Yeah.
why is it called payrolls?
Well, somebody smart would know the answer to that.
Just historically, that's what the state has called it.
Since 1930s.
Yeah, this is a carryover, and I think it even goes farther back than that, when the aid was delivered as a direct cash payment.
Right.
Now, it's not. It's delivered in different ways, but that terminology has never changed in statute, and that's what you all have to approve. So we carry
It's just,
over that
it's just
terminology.
further complicates understanding.
It's not intuitive.
Services.
I totally agree with you. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. It's social service lingo.
Yeah.
And which is why we call ourselves Human Services. So we'll start with Connie
Yeah,
and the expenditures.
up on the screen is the chart that is in page 2 of your packet, and it shows the federal and state revenues for each of the program areas and then the corresponding expenditures, so that you can see how we're tracking in each program area. Overall, we're tracking very well compared to budget. If you look down towards the bottom in the darker shaded area that says total programs, you will see that both the revenue and the expenditures are at about 46% of budget through June. So both areas are slightly under budget, which is good, and they're matching up. There's not too much to note in the expenditures except for child care, where we are significantly below where we thought we would be. As you'll see later on in the memo, we have had less use of child care than we had anticipated when we were budgeting. Apart from that, there's not too much to note unless you have other questions on the expenditures.
Any questions?
I have a question, I'm sorry. I was on vacation last week. Did we get any word about closeout or mitigation?
I have received part of the closeout and mitigation information.
Okay.
And it looks like we are fully covered on child care. Child welfare, I don't have the full information yet.
in admin?
Admin, we're never fully covered under closeout, but we do budget accordingly. So what it's looking like at the moment, and in the next quarter update, I'll bring more complete information. I think that budget to actual, we will still turn out just fine with the closeout, even though I don't think we will be fully mitigated.
So just a reminder, and for Steve, because these are new words, at the end of the state fiscal year, the state takes all of our allocations and they go through a bunch of formulaic machinations that I cannot explain to you, where they take under expenditures here and they move them to over expenditures here, and that is called closeout. The other is called mitigation, and that's child welfare in particular, and that's where small counties or balance of state counties get bailed out for their overages, maybe 100%, maybe not. And so that's what we're waiting to hear. And we're always overexpended in child welfare and administration, and most of the time we get mostly bailed out, but as Connie said, we budget for it, so there are no surprises.
Right. Those are the two pieces. There's the allocation, so we may be overspent on our allocation, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we are overspent budget-wise.
Steve?
On the child care expenditures being 27%, does that include the payroll? Is the payroll included in the expenditures?
Yes, it is.
So that's the total cost of
That's the total cost.
that program. And yet our revenue is up, so do we have money sitting in an account right now just waiting for an upswing in child welfare
You
cases?
draw it down as you use it, and so if you don't use it, you don't get it. You don't get to keep it. With Colorado Works, if we don't use all of that money, we actually can keep up to 30% of that for child care and for child welfare. But that's the only program where we get to keep it if we don't use it. Yeah. We do have some hope, and we'll talk about the child care grant that we just applied for, and potentially trying to reach out to more families and to get our child care utilization back up.
Is this downturn in the child care expenditure somehow related to the downturn in the
Birth rates.
the number of children that were seen in public health and the decline in the number of immunizations for children? Are they somehow
Potentially,
related?
although that was, Liz just saw the decline this year, and child care goes up to age 6 for the most part, or higher if you have special needs children. So I don't know that we could say that per se. Someone asked us this question last time, and we're not really sure why. Kathy can maybe address that again when she comes up. But if you're not looking for work and you're not working, if people have chosen to stop trying to find work, then they're not eligible for CCAP anymore. And that could be a part of what's happening, is sort of the people not looking for work or not working. We're not really sure what it is. It's a good question.
Okay, so then we're going to move on to payrolls.
Okay. I'm just putting it on the screen for the home visitor. You all have this in your packet. And Kathy Lyons, our Eagle County Economic Services Manager, is here to talk about our public assistance and payroll numbers. And these guys do a great job giving us quarterly comparisons, so you can see how programs have grown or gotten smaller, especially childcare.
So on our program payrolls, now this was for the year-to-date second quarter, so January 1 through June 30th. You can see that we have kind of a mixed bag, we have the downturn in the child care from same period last year. We have an increase in our adult financial programs, which are aid to needy disabled and old age pension. So across the board, the state is seeing an increase in the number of households in those programs. We spoke last time briefly about the decrease in our LEAP program. And in Pickens County, we did not see a decrease in the number of applications. We did see a decrease in the number of cases that were approved and the amount of money that was paid out. And then for Colorado Works and food assistance, Colorado Works in Pickens County is a very small program. We generally only have maybe one family a month that's receiving assistance, and that can be either monthly assistance, what's called basic cash assistance, or it can be one-time help to address needs that would keep a family from working. And so that really fluctuates from year to year. But that has very low income eligibility levels, so we historically do not see a large caseload here. And food assistance, I think this is the first time we've seen a drop in our food assistance numbers. Dollar amounts, it's about 4% down. We are also seeing that in the Eagle County area. So we're kind of waiting to see what happens with that. It's estimated that with healthcare reform, and we have about, in Pickens County, it's estimated there's about 670 individuals who may be newly eligible for Medicaid. That when those applications come in, we may find that they may also be eligible for food assistance benefits. So we're anticipating that with that implementation of that program, we will see another upturn in the number of food assistance households and the dollars that are spent for food assistance. Any questions
about the payrolls?
Questions for Kathy?
No questions now about this part. I'd be happy to approve those. But I think we're going to have some more discussion about the outreach efforts to get more people on Medicaid and so on.
Do that.
So I'd like to comment when we get to that.
Okay. Great.
So I would make a motion to approve the quarterly payrolls as presented.
And expenditures?
And expenditures.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't know if we need to go through the average benefit per household per month, which is something that you all have asked for on a regular basis. So unless there are any questions, maybe we can go on to a little bit about CCAP and then talk about healthcare reform.
Any questions?
I would just note that, interestingly enough, the child care cost is the highest for families. Just in order to be able to work and earn income, the average is $1,043 a month, and that would pay for you to go to a community college.
Imagine a child daycare is $10,000 to $12,000 a year. So, right, it's huge.
Okay, so the Child Care Assistance Program, as Connie mentioned, the Pickens County was slightly overspent on its allocation, but she's received word that that was funded through closeout. We had estimated it was around $4,000. So for state fiscal year that ended June 30th, the county has been made whole with those expenses. This year there was a slight decrease in the new allocation for the state fiscal year from July 1 to June 30th. So we'll see how that flows out as we move through the year. As we've mentioned, the caseload has decreased. It's remained fairly steady now, around 6 to 7 households per month. And again, of note is that we continue to serve the largest group that is served is those households that are under 130% of the federal poverty level. So the program is serving those families who have the most need. One of the other changes that occurred that I think has been impacting the caseload numbers is we had been able to pay for someone to do job search for up to 180 days, so really like a 6-month period. And the program rules changed a little while back, back to where they were pre of the ERA funding, to only a 30-day period that someone can do job search that we will pay for child care assistance. So that's, I mean, we had quite a few families who were using that benefit in order to do job search. So really, we lost 5 months for every one of those households that we may have been providing that child care for job search purposes. So I think that was one of the additional factors in bringing down the number of kids on care. As Nan mentioned, we are partnering with Early Childhood Council and we applied for a grant. And one of the portions of that grant is all around infant and toddler quality care. And so one of the pieces in that grant that was agreed across, and it's Lake County, Eagle County, Pickens County, and then our regional Early Childhood Council. And that is to create an outreach position that would be run by the Early Childhood Council, and that position could help families move through the application process for child care assistance. When we go back and look at the reasons that households have not been approved for child care assistance, and this is for Eagle and Pickens County combined, it really is that families are not completing the application process. So they may apply, but then they're denied because we didn't get the usually what it is verification of whatever the activity is, whether that's job search, employment, or going to some kind of education that's covered under that program. So any questions on CCAP or the joint grant application? I think we expect to hear about that mid-September.
We did work with Kids First as well.
Yes.
Just in case you were wondering, we don't work without our city partner. And they encouraged us to participate in this application.
Okay. The next thing in your memo is around the Colorado Works MOU extension. So the Colorado Works program, and part of that is the Child Care Assistance Program. Every year, the state and the counties are required to sign an MOU agreeing to the parameters of the program. So the last time we actually did a full MOU agreement was for state fiscal year 2011. We did a written extension last year, and the state sent us a letter indicating that they were just extending the current extension until the end of December. So they are working to create a new MOU that really reflects changes in philosophies and how the programs are working now that we are we are 15 years beyond welfare reform. So really trying to reflect the outcomes we're trying to get to is really to help people become self-sufficient, become employable, and get those skills, get a job, and maintain that job. So we should be back sometime at the beginning of the year with a new MOU for you to review. Any questions on that? Food assistance program changes. I just wanted to bring this up because you may be hearing things about it in the community. So every October 1, food assistance looks at its income eligibility levels, and it looks at its standard deductions that households can receive, and it adjusts those based on poverty level and different things. So as is the norm, we are going to be moving to our 2013 eligibility levels October 1 for food assistance, and they also generally increase the basic benefits. So this year, really estimating that households may get a few more dollars on their benefit in October because they've increased what that basic benefit is. The flip side of that is on November 1st, the ERA funding that we had been receiving for food assistance that was bumping families up maybe $13 to $25 or $30 a month on their benefit goes away. And so while we're going to get a small increase, households will see in October, in November it'll turn around and they'll actually be getting a greater decrease than they got an increase. So the net is households basically will be getting $10 to $35 or $40 less per month, depending on the household size, in their food assistance benefits. So the state is working to create some messaging, some talking points, some posters, information we can be providing. As soon as we receive that from the state, I will make sure that that gets out to everyone. We'll be doing some communication, some outreach. I expect we'll be probably maybe doing, I don't know if we want to consider putting something in a press release or something like that to help the community understand what those changes are. So just wanted to make you aware of that in case you see questions coming up in the community about that.
Rachel?
Yeah, I could be mixing some apples and oranges here. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but with the Farm Bill not passing yet, and even the Senate version of the bill cutting, I think, another $2 billion annually from the food stamp assistance program, do you have a sense of how the requirements or the standards for eligibility are going to change yet? Or when, I mean, since the current Farm Bill is expiring this year and there's no replacement bill, do we have any sense of that?
We have not gotten any information from the state about what that may look like. Okay. So everything we received, and we did, receive the notice from the feds about the increase in October and the decrease in November. So as of now, we are moving forward
with what you have.
With what we have.
Okay.
Some counties are writing letters to their congressional delegates to ask them to protect the SNAP program. SNAP is the food assistance, the supplemental nutrition program. Would that be something you guys would be interested in? I could try to craft a letter for our congressional delegate to ask them to protect the food
I certainly
program.
would support that. It's to see the two programs separating, I think, is really very unfortunate.
Okay.
I don't know if others have followed the issue very closely at all, but the traditional bargain was kind of that the urban folks would support all these farm subsidies because the farm people were supporting the people in need with food assistance. And then by taking them apart, there's a lot less rural legislators than there are urban legislators, and suddenly you don't have the base of support for even the farm subsidies and the farm support going forward. So by separating them, it seems to have created a real bit of political gridlock about that.
Steve?
My question was also about the effect of the Farm Bill being basically at a standstill in Congress. And is the ARA funding, is that related to the Farm Bill funding being cut off? Is that why that is going away, or?
No, the ARA funding was the Recovery and Reinvestment Act dollars that was put in 2009, 2010 timeframe. So that at that point when it was created, there was a sunset date for it, an end date for it, which is October 31st of this year.
Okay. And if Congress doesn't reauthorize the expenditures, is all this going to go to zero, or does the state put in money to support what the federal government is not supporting, or what happens?
The state has been pretty clear through CCI to say we are not backfilling changes, cuts, anything associated with the sequester. That we don't have the capacity at the state level, and they're not planning on picking it up.
And therefore, I would say I would be in favor of writing a letter as a board to our congressional delegation.
Yeah.
Okay, great. We'll do that.
All right. So Health Assistance Network grant. So as you know, we, 3 counties, Eagle, Pitkin, and Garfield, Human Service, Public Health Departments, and the Mountain Family Health Centers applied for a grant to operate a regional health assistance network in the 3 counties. We received a $750,000 grant for 18 months, July 1, 2013 to December 31st, 2014. In that grant, we are hiring what are called health coverage guides, and they will be able to provide in-person assistance to anyone in our communities who is seeking help using the new health insurance marketplace. And so we have 4 of those that we applied for in the grant. Those were funded. One of them will be placed in Elgibel, one in Rifle, one in Glenwood, and one in Eagle. And then they will cover, a geographic area around that base. So, for example, the person in Elgibel will be coming up and providing services here in Aspen, probably at the hospital. We don't quite have all those details worked out. Colorado West, we have many partners who are supporting this. So we've hired that position, and her name is Yolanda Thererfelder, and some of you may know her. She used to work, I believe, at the clerk and recorder's offices in the elections department. So she will be based out of Elgibel. We've also hired Jen Quevedo, and she will be based in Glenwood. And we've hired our Rifle person, who is Sonia Costa. Our new manager for the program is Millie Vasquez. So everyone is going through their certification training right now so that we're ready to go on October 1st to provide appointments for all of our customers. During the month of September, we will be doing outreach. So we've already done a few presentations to different groups. Later this week, I think it's Thursday morning, we have a meeting with the Connect for Health Colorado marketing group, as well as the Eagle County Communications group, to kind of begin solidifying our outreach plan. And when we had our discussions before applying for the grant, to address your questions, Rachel, what we had agreed was that our communications would take the lead and then work through the other county communication departments or PIOs to make sure those messages were getting out in all the different papers, radio stations, whatever venues that there are that are usually used by the county government for information sharing. Okay?
Yeah, this seems like a large budget. I know across a large county area like this, in 18 months, it's probably really not. But I'd like to make sure we're reaching through some of the non-traditional measures as well. And I certainly appreciate the desire to have consistency of message and working with all the other partners. So I think that's appropriate. But I think it'd be great to produce a grassroots TV show about this and have that, how to get involved, and have one of the agents, produce on there. I'd love to see us get a little bit of agenda time through Michael's board that he's on, the Aspen Chamber Resort Association, so that those employers can be aware. And to the extent that your communication with the Connect Colorado, I think that some sort of email flyer would be great. That you don't have to open, it's not an attachment, there's the information. And then groups such as the Snowmass Resort Association or Aspen Chamber of Commerce can email it out to all their members, whether they're in attendance or not. But I think the connection with the employer community is going to be huge, of how you can now be able to purchase for yourself some affordable insurance, or with the Medicaid expansion, how the lower income workers can get onto the Medicaid insurance program, because the more someone can get their flu shots and not spread flu, or get their testing and not have more catastrophic illness, the best. And then I think that if they have any sort of posters, we should really think about, being a poster down at the food bank on Mill Street, posters in healthcare offices or wherever, we might be able to reach into a different community and a different crowd. And just, the Aspen Community Foundation might be a great venue for helping us reach out to additional groups and partners. I'm sure the pod is getting involved as well. But that's why if there's some sort of great email communication that, can, go wild like a tweet, or something like that is what we really are looking for.
So we are doing a presentation to the Regional Human Service Agencies group on September 11th from 9 to 11:30 at the Elgibel, the Eagle County Community Center in Elgibel. So that's open to the public. You're certainly welcome to attend. And we are waiting for Connect for Health. We've been anxiously awaiting the arrival of our materials, our posters and our flyers and all of those things. So those are being printed right now, so we hope that we're going to have those in the next few weeks. That we'll be able to be getting out there and really get them
And one of the, just a reminder that one of the reasons why our grant was so big is that we are planning on working with small businesses. So you had an option if you wanted to take that on or you didn't as a site. And so we were working with the chambers, and that is knowing that we're almost all in the mountain region, resort region, that small businesses is where we're going to be finding people who we can get insured.
Sounds very good.
Any questions on that?
Can you just explain what Northwest COG is doing as the hub? Do you know? Can you explain that?
So as a regional hub, their role is really to help the different assistance sites. So we have ours, that's our 3-county. There's one in like Grand Jackson, one in Summit. So their role is to really help the assistance sites with basically whatever it is they need to be successful. So if we're having trouble getting materials, they can help us with that. They can help us get training from the state. I mean, really, they can support our outreach, help coordinate it so we're not duplicating efforts and different things like that. So that's the role of the regional hub.
They're the regional hub for the entire Northwest, which is Rio Blanco all the way over to Grand Jackson and down to Lake.
Are you submitting potential articles to the regional newspapers as well? I mean, I think that probably get some good press that way, or even interviews with NPR, KDNK.
Right, we have all of those things on our list. We've been waiting because Connect for Health Colorado had to issue their communication guidelines. So we've received those. That's why we're having the meeting this week, so we can then actually move forward on the outreach plan that we've been drafting. So, okay. If you have ideas of other places, I took all those down. Please feel free to
booth in front of
send
City
them to
Market.
me. Yeah, we'll be looking at the health fairs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're looking. They're actually, they Connect for Colorado are looking for the unusual places to capture people: fairs, back to school nights, city markets and marketplaces, and so those will be all the things that we'll look at.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Kathy, for all your work. So, Kim, how are we doing on time? Good.
Okay.
Yep.
I guess I'd like to ask first, is there anything that you would like for me to speak more in depth about or highlight before I start? Okay, so I'll just walk through it and just hit the major points. I just provided an update on the Pitkin Eagle IGA. Plus you. We're almost hitting our 1-year mark, which would be October 1st, and it's been a memorable year and a great year in many ways, even though it's been challenging many times. We are fully staffed, and that includes the additional position that Eagle County provided to us because of our increased numbers, referrals, assessments, cases, and soon, and I'll talk about this in a minute, our adult protection services. As you can see from the graph that I presented, the referrals that we had, which is pretty on course with what we've had in previous years for just Pitkin County for the state fiscal year, it's 113. We accept about 43% of those, and that's pretty close, between 40 and 45% each year of those referrals to do our ongoing investigation. And then the number of cases are what we average monthly, and those are more in-depth work that we do with families if we decide to open a case. We also have increased court involvement and out-of-home placements. The out-of-home placements, fortunately, in our county are with kin, but we do have some other out-of-home placements for the Algebelba Salt area, which are out-of-home in foster care or with kin foster care placement, certified placement. As you can see, the numbers for Eagle are just from October of 2012 through June 2013, and their numbers are steady with ours, so that's not including 3 months of information since we started in October. I will say that when I say that we've learned a lot, I think that we understand better how to move through transitions and provide more structure and processes and that sort of thing, since our staff has doubled and so have our referrals. One of the things that I just wanted to say is with our new staff on board, they've come from other counties, Front Range, Western Slope, and what they have repeatedly said is that they really see a difference in terms of the way, from the leadership at the top and the Board of County Commissioners supports issues related to safety for kids, families, and adults. And so I really appreciate that when we've come before you that you've taken that seriously and supported us. And I know you have to look at many other issues, but I would say in that area it's been very clear to them how different it is, and we appreciate all of your support. In terms of the types of things, and I will have this next time because I'm still doing an analysis in terms of the types of referrals that we're getting and the assessments that we're going out on. I guess the major trend that I would identify is over the last year is that there's a real increase in working with families where there's family violence, and that can be between partners, it can be between husband and wife, it can be between other caregivers and or youth and their parents. And so that's something that we really, the situations seem to be much more complex and dangerous, I would say. And so what we're really, Nan suggested working with some of our partners on seeing what we could do to impact that on a more, on a community level, and how we can partner with folks and get some information out to the community about the impact of domestic violence. In terms of collaborations, one big collaboration is the 4E waiver. 4E funds were typically utilized to support out-of-home care, and it was through the federal government that went down through the state and ended up in local communities. And what they're finding is more and more they want to do, I would call it prevention during the intervention, so that families can remain together, or kids can remain with kin, or family friends, and that is definitely a best practice, and the research supports that that's best for kids and families. So what the state has done is they applied for what is a waiver for 4E. Several other states have already done that over the last 5 years. Colorado applied this year and received it, and basically what they're asking for is for those funds to be redirected to more prevention, supportive services on the front end, so that kids don't end up in out-of-home placement. And they've seen the cost effectiveness for that, both financial but also emotionally for kids and families. And so we applied for that with Garfield County for two parts of it. One is called family engagement. The other one is called permanency roundtables. And just in a nutshell, those are just team meetings that we have that are guided and facilitated with families and partners to help move people along and see that they're getting the targeted services that they need. And then the other piece is the permanency roundtable, where they follow kids who are in placement until they're, some kids are in placement until they're 18, some until they're 21. And so we want to make sure that we're following children and consistently so that they get the best services and support that they need. We were really fortunate to get that, and the reason that we applied actually with Garfield County is that they have the infrastructure in place and the special training and services to provide those facilitated team meetings. And the other piece is kinship supports, which I didn't mean to neglect, and that is very important because often kids will be in foster care placements. They get lots of support, but then they're in a kin placement, and people, grandparents are have children come live with them unexpectedly and don't have the same level of support. So that's to really level the playing field and make sure that, again, we support the least restrictive setting for kids. They are going to hold the funding. All of this is going to be, but they're also providing the staff resources. We will be evaluated, anybody who applied for this 4E waiver, and not everybody received it across the state, by both the state and federal entities. And when I went to a meeting a few weeks ago, we talked about that, and I said, well, we don't have the same numbers that you might have in Denver County, say, or whatever. And they said what they're really interested in with us is not the quantitative, but more of the qualitative information that we can provide, because we have stories to attach to the information that can really help them determine how we can more effectively move through the process. So the other piece is the...
Hold on, let me just say one thing. So the 4E waiver is a big deal in the state, and you guys have heard about it. I just want to let you guys know that very few small counties got in on this, and we were able to because of our relationship with Garfield County and Eagle County. We actually applied all together, although Eagle took a different route. But what I think we're seeing is that as money is becoming available at the state, most of our small county peers have no capacity to grab on, to make application, to consider how they're going to test some of these outcomes. And so we're just really fortunate that all these years of building relationships with Eagle and Garfield have positioned us in such a way that while the money doesn't come to us, the services are coming to our families, and that's really all we want.
Thanks, I'm glad you shared that.
Yeah.
It's a really good
I
point.
just add that this was an issue that CCI lobbied on heavily in Washington, D.C. with our state legislators to support us receiving the 4E waivers. And so I'm glad to hear we're taking advantage of it.
Yeah, yeah, we're excited about it, definitely. So the next piece, and there are many things going on, but I just wanted to highlight the bigger things right now, and the other piece is the collaborative management services. Several counties have developed this system to work with families who are at risk of entering in the child welfare system or the juvenile system, but are not quite there, and we want to support them so that they don't have to come into our system. And so we applied for Healthy Community Funds, the Healthy Community Fund grant last year, to support working with those families using this model, and it's very similar to what I just described with the 4E team meetings. And we just had our first meeting yesterday, but there's been a lot of behind-the-scenes work to get it going with our community partners, and several people are involved in the decision-making around that. So I just wanted to share that. We're very excited about that. And adult protection services. So many things have changed in that area, and we are actually going to be providing adult protection services for Algebel and Basalt, Eagle County, beginning September 1st. It's going to be what we call a soft rollout, and we're working with them and have a very clear transition plan about how we move forward and evaluate on a regular basis. Based on our experiences last year, I think we've got an even better plan than we had last year to really make sure that the process goes as smoothly as possible, and that partners understand how they can work with us. I think the only other piece of this, and I didn't share information about adult protection referrals, but I have information from January to current, and we had a total of 55 referrals, and 16% of those were actual APS clients. The rest we referred to a program called Care Management, and I can talk more with you about that later, but basically we have funding through Senior Services that is subcontracted with Aspen Counseling Services, and they provide some of those more preventive services that we were talking about that they have similar to child welfare. And so we're in a lot of discussions just talking about how we can improve that piece and serve as many people as possible and on many different levels. So I just wanted to share that with you. I can give you more information on that next time.
George?
Yes?
Can you just give a brief overview of exactly what adult protection services protects adults against? What are some of the things that are, I mean, because
That's a good
we know,
question, yeah.
we see the child abuse issues, and we know, and that's kind of in our realm, but there's kind of a little under the table or under the hidden dark closet thing that's happening with the adult protection side. So if you can give a little overview as to.
Yeah, I think the interesting difference between child welfare and adult protection is children really don't have a voice, and so with adults we do have a voice, but it really depends on if you can advocate for yourself. And so what I would say a really strong distinction is you're a vulnerable adult who can't make decisions because of cognitive functioning or whatever. I mean, people are allowed to make decisions whether we agree or don't agree. It's more if they can't make those decisions for themselves and they really need some help along the way, whether
So
that
if
be a
they're-
guardian.
If they're incapacitated because of dementia or mental illness or health issues or substance abuse, and they're so incapacitated that they can't protect themselves from the danger of financial exploitation, physical abuse, or neglect, or self-neglect. Those are the four main areas that we watch for. And majority of our cases are self-neglect. People who are not managing well, their neighbors and friends and family are concerned about them, or they have no friends or family because they burned all their bridges. Occasionally we get financial exploitation. Banks are required by law to report to us if there's weird banking things going on, or they're afraid that someone is being taken advantage of.
So in the case of a child, they reach an age and they have a say in, more of a say in their life, I should say. In the case of adult protection services, that say has to be taken away under some sort of circumstance. So is it a family member that says, my parent can no longer make decisions for themselves, a neighbor that says that, the authorities come in and make that decision, that clarification, and how does that whole system work?
So we don't have the authority to make that decision if they're not competent to make decisions, but we would help facilitate a process where they would go see a doctor, and it has to be a doctor that approves that, I guess, if you will. In terms of, we get all of the above, by the way, and I think that one of the things is that they can refuse services. They can say, I don't want you in my life. They can say, I'm going to continue to make these decisions. And I think our point of intervention where we might involve a court system, or there's a very high threshold for that. So they would basically be making really, they would be vulnerable and making poor decisions, but they're incapable of making their own decisions for whatever reasons. We've had some situations where, for instance, someone was being exploited and also didn't have any family members and had dementia. And so that's something that we had to intervene at the court level. And like I said, it was a process, and the judges usually have a very high threshold to say, no, we're going to be making decisions for you. We're going to be your guardian. Or whatever.
Most of the time, though, like with child welfare, we try to get people to work with us voluntarily. And, that's what we do in the majority of our child welfare cases. And we do the same with adult protection. Is we go in, we develop relationships with people, we try to find out if they're willing to work with us and try to take small, simple steps towards improving their life. But if there's a drastic exploitation issue, we would go to court.
Very challenging area.
Yeah. And
I think
of the referrals, about how many develop into a case? Because there could be a referral by someone, you investigate it and decide it is or isn't worth pursuing further.
Right now, last year, I think we had about 16% that opened up into cases. what we would, we would work with them. And of course, our volume is lower. But I think that we've had a lot of conversation about how we can be even more accessible to people if they want that, but to develop the relationship over time. I think making the transition from child welfare to adult protection even in a given day it's like a framework shift. And so that can be challenging. And I think with child welfare, it's like you do something and then you close, because generally you can move out of that. Whereas working with adults, the relationship piece is really important. Like Nan said, I mean, it might start just a visit here and there, and then you can develop that relationship enough where they would be willing to maybe talk to you about some other things and other needs and allow us to support them in other ways.
Okay. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you. Thank you all so much.
Appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Okay, so speaking of adult protection or management or whatever the heck you want to talk about.
Well, I think I just have a few minutes, right? So.
You have 10 minutes, I think,
Oh,
as I could tell from Kim's watch. Is it about 20 hours?
Well, 6 minutes to the schedule, but it's up to the chair, of course. So.
I wasn't really expecting to have time, but we added it on. I did bring, at your request, Rob, a comparison of the nutrition numbers specifically to the same quarter last year, and offered a written explanation for that. Let's see. The state is really applying very stringent, some kind of new stringent restrictions, and also enforcing what have been, some rules all along that have been treated rather flexibly about home delivered meals. And despite that, we are continuing to increase. And as I said, that's just a predictable effect of an aging population. So some of those restrictions involve caregivers. We used to be able to send a meal along for a caregiver. Now that caregiver pretty much has to be the spouse and eligible that way. The homebound definition has become much more rigid. And despite that, we are increasing. So that's where you see that. The congregate meal counts, again, we're still working with that shift we had last year where Whitcomb Terrace Assisted Living switched to providing their lunches in-house, which we've talked about now for a couple of quarters. And so when I compare this year to last year, that still involves that quarter last year, that the numbers were higher because we had the Whitcomb Terrace participants. However, as we move along, we are catching up very quickly with those previous levels, previous to that change with Whitcomb Terrace, and 26% increase in July, over July of 12. You'll see that in the next quarter, but I kind of wanted to say it since it looks kind of bad on here. Looks low. And then an additional increase in home services in July. So we'll see where that goes. I think we are rebounding, and people are finding us. And part of that is due to our outreach campaign that we did. We realized that, as we talked about last quarter, that we've had some additional kind of identity issues around the construction and kind of where we are, and are we part of the hospital or are we part of the assisted living facility? And so we began this series of radio spots, and we think probably that has helped to make people more aware of some services that we offer. Our transportation is way up, 23% over the same quarter last year, which is a really fun challenge, especially when we're trying to be very creative and, again, flexible with those services and serve outside of our traditional boundaries. And we're up to really pushing the limit on that, but We get a little relief after the middle of the summer is over. So right now, just this week, we've got a little relief with the music leaving, and we just have a few people who tend to be here seasonally who are away for a few months. The big news is the strategic planning for aging well, which went really well. The first public convening was held on July 23rd at the high school, and about 75 people attended. We had a little over 80 with the
Energetic
people, and they were. I mean, it was great. It was very gratifying for me personally to see that level of interest and participation. Since then, the steering committee has met, as well as the planning committee has met a number of times. We meet again this week. The process of putting of identifying the 4 work group topic areas is very close to being finished. Just roughly, those are kind of the information and assistance, access to resources is one. Aging in place, both the physical and home services areas, the physical and mental health and wellness is third, and connections. The decision hasn't quite been made about what to call that. It's really about social engagement, community activities, those ways that the communities can support aging. And the last opportunity for people to join will be at the second convening, where the work groups will actually form. People have already expressed their interest in a group, and we'll sort that out, and the steering committee. And the work groups will actually form and begin some work on September 16th. So that is one last additional opportunity. If anyone from the public is interested in missed it and would like to contact us, we can get them caught up, and they can come on September 16th and still join a group to work for the next 6 months to research and analyze and make recommendations for building this aging well community for life.
Keep going, that's fine.
I think that's it. Unless you have any questions.
Any questions for Marty?
Any thoughts, Steve? You were at the Aging Well. Do you have anything you want to add or any thoughts about it?
It's a really, when you say energetic, it is a great group of people who are really concerned about, what's happening, and they want to help out. I think we'll probably see some really good results from the Aging Well community. And I thought it was interesting, the question was asked, how many of you are over 60, I think was the question. And hardly anybody raised their hand. I didn't raise my hand either, but and how many consider yourself senior citizens? And hardly anybody raised their hand, but there was a high number of senior citizens over age 60 or over age 65 there who are participating. So.
I did one more quick thing, if that's okay. Just one more thing, and it had to do following up on the financial pieces that you've been discussing, and that is that our state and federal grants were reapproved. We're in a 4-year process, as you know, and we're reapproved for exactly the same amount for this fiscal year that began July 1st. We're told that there is an expected small cut, kind of a sequestration effect at the federal level, and even though the state has said they're not going to backfill, because the Older Americans Act was increased, was partially restored to its highest level, the area agency and the Northwest Cog feel that there will be no issues with covering that, so that's good news.
Good, well, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Kim and Kathy and
Great.
Marty and Nan and Missy
We did not do an emergency assistance fund update because we thought we only had 45 minutes and when we were writing the memo, so we'll do that at the next quarter. But yeah, a great team, amazing things, whether it's public health or in human services. Pitkin County is really fortunate to have such dedicated people to work here. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, the last thing on our agenda is the EOTC prep.
Yeah, and I'll try to be quick. Just a reminder, we do have an EOTC meeting, 4 o'clock on Thursday. We'll be in Snowmass, and per our earlier conversation, we'll get some information out on rides. The meeting this time is primarily updates. There'll be a review, as we always do, of decisions made at the previous EOTC meeting. Okay. Of the previous EOTC meeting. We'll be giving updates on ongoing projects, including Ruby Park, the BRT implementation, and the underpass project. And Tom Oken will be doing a financial overview. There's going to be one decision-making discussion, which is really more about getting some direction to have more strategic discussions. And we talked about this a little bit last time, but Bob Schultz will be there. And in essence, we're getting ready to come up on celebrating 20 years of the EOTC. And one of the things that the Public Works and Transportation staffs from each entity did with Bob Schultz is come around and talk to each of the managers about where we saw EOTC going, and apparently they came to us separately. We all said the same thing. We all had the same concern, which was it's been a long time now since we've really stepped back and done a strategic review of the EOTC. So everything from purpose to prioritize projects, mission, vision, that sort of thing. And so Bob will be giving a review of some of the accomplishments over the 20 years. There's a strategic planning effort in 2009 was the most recent discussion with the EOTC. Since then, we have a lot of new faces around the table. I know at least two of the board members, myself. You look at City Council, you've got a lot of new faces in Aspen as well as in Snowmass Village. And so we all thought it was time to come back, take a step back from the weeds a little bit and just bringing individual projects in and look in 2014 to really look at our mission, look at our vision, and try and develop a plan that works from that level down to having a prioritized list of projects, really, that the EOTC is committed to. That may look like what we have now, but all the players haven't had that discussion. So Bob was going to lay out a process for having those discussions. I think it would include what does our decision-making process look like going forward for the EOTC, as well as focusing on our priorities and projects and funding and that sort of thing. So Bob's going to lay that out and be looking for some guidance about whether the elected officials on the EOTC are supportive of convening and having those sorts of discussions and developing that plan. So that will be our only real decision point. No real surprises. Financially, we're looking good. Well, Tom, financially, are we looking good? Is that going to be
Yeah. When we enter into this, and Bob Schultz is coming up, well, who's doing that? Did we ask for it?
Did the EOTC ask for it?
Well, for instance, did the commissioner say, let's do this? I mean, I'm not sure exactly how this is coming.
Well, it's really going to be a staff recommendation, Michael. So this would be the opportunity for the elected officials to say, yes, we think that's a good idea, or no, we don't think that level of discussion is necessary, that we have a good handle on our priorities and where we're going.
So staff got
Staff's
together
recommending.
and talked to Bob Schultz and said, we think we need some sort of strategic overview the direction we're going in.
Well, we had this discussion a little bit at the last EOTC meeting, and there were two levels. One was we need to revisit our decision-making processes at the EOTC, and we also need to at least reaffirm what our priorities are. And so there was some direction given at that point to say, yeah, we need to look at those two things. As we dug into it more, what made more sense, at least from a staff perspective, was that, well, we need to start with the big picture about what it is we're really trying to accomplish now as the EOTC. Do we have the same priorities? Do we have the same mission and vision as when we started 20 years ago? And when we revisited it in 2009, and then talk about how do we do it, which is the decision making and such. So this is our recommendation on how to have those discussions. Again, it will be up to the elected officials as to whether you want to move forward that way.
Okay, thanks, John.
Rachel?
I think everyone already knows I'm not going to be there. We'll be in Denver meeting with the new director of the Colorado Water Conservation Board. And I'm glad it looks like, quote, a relatively light agenda and then not issues coming to blows. Mm-hmm. But for that very reason, I really support this concept going forward. I think we have to make sure we don't rush to pick a date to make sure that CML calendar and other calendars are coordinated. We really get full participation. But, kind of thinking about it, maybe Bill Bueno, but otherwise I might be one of the longest living members of the EOTC from when we first formed the group 20 years ago. And for me, part of those things we're going to review should definitely be how have we fulfilled the ballot language, from the first ballot to the other ones which we have changed. But it's hard to think of any other group, RAFTA, our board, city council, or others, who don't, even at least annually do a retreat and kind of check in and bring new members up to speed with both the history and, sharing a common goal going forward. So I think that there could be a lot of value to that. It was the whole half cent was born out of years of EOTC meetings without any money, and then agreeing on a funding source to accomplish the goals that 2 or 3 years worth of meetings had accomplished about keeping traffic the same level and instituting a system that has now led to the full regional transportation authority. And so I would love to see us get beyond what, even the 2009 was a good meeting, but it was more about how do we fund free bus services and not about are we doing the best job we can for the money available, getting people off the road, and maintaining these other goals of the original ballot language. So I think this would be a great opportunity, but I want to make sure it's not something that's rushed, and I want to make sure it's something that's not half attended, because it really should set the priorities, and maybe there's always some room for matching money of new grant opportunities that come up from the state or the feds, but I think we have a real role. And even just discussing whether that 1% transportation tax is something that we're all going to feel good about, or we're going to get our fair share on, or how would EOTC lobby at the State House to make sure there's equity returning to groups like the RTA. If there's a new 1% statewide sales tax, that could be a pivotal priority for us for next year to make sure we don't get scalped in that process. So I just think there could be a lot of value there.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? All right, I was a little remiss. I forgot to call for a motion to adjourn as the Board of Social Services.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye, and we will adjourn our special meeting.
Aye.
And if that's it for today, we will adjourn and be back here tomorrow at noon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Presidents.
Thank you.